The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today on the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from Barbara Honegger's book, October Surprise. The October Surprise the book is about was the 1980 Reagan campaign led by Bill Casey, who Reagan later made the head of the CIA, but he was Reagan's campaign director in 1980, about their actions with the Iranian government, cutting a deal where if the Iranians would hold the hostages throughout the election of 1980 to make Jimmy Carter look bad and weak, then if they won the election, they would sell weapons to Iran, which, of course, is a deal that they kept. We know of this as the Iran-Contra scandal. So I'm reading from the very last chapter. It's the epilogue, and it's titled A Kinder, Gentler Nation. President Reagan signed intelligence authorizations in 1984 and 1985, which were considered licenses to kill, according to top government officials. As we have seen, Oliver North and Amiram Nir's U.S.-Israeli covert operations were authorized by a still-secret accord, never revealed to congressional intelligence committees as required by law, which may have also authorized political assassinations in the name of counterterrorism. We have seen that Vice President George Bush, this is the elder, met with Amiram Nir in Israel in late 1986, when he could have signed the accord with Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres, for whom Nir worked. Author Seymour Hersh has charged Oliver North with being President Reagan's assassination planner. We've reviewed reports that North boasted that anyone who leaked or threatened to reveal the administration's secret Iran initiative would be killed, and that some of the North Secord Hakim team were reportedly involved in political assassinations under the umbrella of counterterrorism. Given this context, it's instructive to note what has happened to many of the individuals who were reportedly involved in or knew about the secret negotiations between Iran and the 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign, and or about secret U.S. arms deliveries to the Khomeini regime in the early 1980s. So then she goes through the list of people. Dead: William Casey, CIA director, who reportedly attended meetings in Paris, France on October 19 and 20, 1980 with Iranian officials and agents of French intelligence to arrange an arms for hostages delay deal with Iran. The morning of Casey's first scheduled under oath testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee on the secret Iran initiative, he was struck by seizures in his CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and underwent speech incapacitating left brain surgery shortly thereafter. Had he lived to testify, according to a lifelong friend and counsel, Milton Gould, Casey would have told, quote, the entire truth, end quote. He died on May 6, 1987. Dead: Amiram Nir died November 30th, 1988, in a plane crash in Mexico. Nir, who resigned in March of 1988, had been chief counterterrorism advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. He was Oliver North's Israeli counterpart in the near-North covert operations covered by a still-secret accord reportedly signed by Peres and President Reagan, or according to some U.S. government sources, by someone at a lower level. Easily Vice President George Bush during his late 1986 meeting with Nir in Jerusalem, when Nir briefed Bush on the Iran arms initiative. Informed sources suspect sabotage of Nir's plane when Oliver North sought to introduce the secret U.S.-Israel accord as part of the defense in his trial on conspiracy charges. The Reagan-Bush administration refused to produce the document, and the conspiracy charge was dropped. Nir died 2 months before the start of Oliver North's trial. The truth of the final entry in Michael Ledine's book, Perilous Statecraft, may have something to do with his timely death. Quote, Insofar as anyone may have had something dramatically new to add to our knowledge of Iran-Contra, it is likely to be Amiram Nir. Dead. Cyrus Hashemi died in London on July 21st, 1986, 2 days after being diagnosed as having a rare, virulent form of fast-acting cancer. Died 2 days after his diagnosis. According to Iranian-American arms dealer Hoshag Lavi, with whom he worked on a major Iran arms-related sting operation in the 1985 and early 86, Hashemi was assassinated by U.S. government agents. According to self-proclaimed CIA pilot Richard Brennicky, Hashemi had been a participant in the October 20, 1980 Paris meeting with 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign manager Bill Casey, Iran arms dealer Hoshag Lavi, Iranian officials, and agents of French intelligence to work out the original arms for hostage delay deal with Iran. Before his death, Hashemi was reported to have said that his 1981-82 U.S. arms sales to Iran had been necessary to obtain the release of the 52 U.S. hostages, released moments after Reagan's inauguration in 1981, and had been approved by the CIA, which Casey headed. Hashemi was also the instigator of the arms for hostages proposal, which resulted in the August 1985 TOW missile shipment to Iran. Dead. The Ayatollah Mohammad Beheshti, who reportedly sent a personal representative, according to one source, Jalal al-Din Farsi, to the pre-election Paris meeting of October 19, 1980, with 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign manager Bill Casey, and according to some reports, also with George Herbert Walker Bush. Beheshti died in a bomb explosion at Islamic Republican Party headquarters in Iran on June 28, 1981. Dead. William Buckley, CIA station chief in Beirut. And it continues. It's October Surprise by Barbara Honegger.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. I'm Thom Hartmann, and boy, it is getting weirder and weirder. Donald Trump tweeted out this morning, our beautiful statues are vanishing, or words to that effect. I mean, there is so much going on right now that I just, where to start? So the question is this, is this another Access Hollywood moment or not? When the Access Hollywood tape came out and Donald Trump was bragging to Billy Bush that he could grab women by the crotch anytime he wanted because he was a star, and that he loved to do it, and he had to put Tic Tacs in his mouth before he went out to meet that young woman because she was cute, and he just might want to kiss her. It was bizarre, and many Republicans at that point, when that Access Hollywood tape came out, figured, okay, this is it. He is toast. In fact, that was the one moment when Paul Ryan came out and said, nah, this is not us, right? And then, of course, it blew over. It's like Steve Bannon said something. People are willing to put up with a lot if they think that their own interests are going to be served, is where I was going with that. Steve Bannon, when he had this conversation, and I don't think it was like Scaramucci's, the Mooch's conversation with the reporter, there's pretty broad consensus in this town. Consensus is probably too strong a word, but I've talked to a number of people off the record who are like, yeah, the Mooch was probably drunk or high or something, but Steve Bannon probably not. When he called Robert Kuttner, and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. North Korea, no, we're not going to nuke North Korea. Well, his exact quote was, until somebody solves the part of the equation that shows me that 10 million people in Seoul don't die in the first 30 minutes from conventional weapons, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no middle military solution here. They got us. And he's right. But the thing that got me, and he said that these guys are a collection of clowns, talking about the white nationalists and the white supremacists. And by the way, the AP is out saying, let's differentiate here. White nationalists are white people who think that they should have their own country or their own part of the country. White supremacists are white people who think that they're superior to all other races and therefore entitled to power and privilege as a consequence of that. And they're suggesting that we should no longer use the phrase alt-right, or at least the Associated Press, the AP, is no longer going to use that phrase unless they put it in quotation marks, because they think it sanitizes the racism. And I agree. And the whole alt-left thing, of course, is purely an invention of Fox News and right-wing hate radio. It pretty much doesn't exist anywhere else. There's a couple of message boards that are heavily dominated by people who hate, quote, Bernie bros, and the mythical creature out there. It's not so mythical, but whatever. That use alt-left and have been using alt-left for some months now as a shorthand phrase to trash supporters of Bernie Sanders in the primary against Hillary Clinton. And that has to stop because there is no alt-left. This is just, and frankly, there's no alt-right. There's the racists on the right, and there's anti-fascists on the, well, I'm not even sure it's on the left. I mean, this gets us back to, I had the caller yesterday who said, oh, the anti-fascist movement started with the communists in Germany. Well, of course. I mean, it was the fascists were going after the communists. Pastor Niemöllers, I think it started first, they came for the trade unionists, but then they came for the communists, right? I mean, Hitler was rounding up communists. Of course, they're going to say, we don't like fascists. So, but Steve Bannon, what he said is the longer they talk about identity politics, I got them. I want them to talk about racism every day. If the left is focused on race and identity and we go with economic nationalism, we can crush the Democrats. Now, what he's not saying is that if you mix identity politics and economics, which, by the way, is what Trump and Bannon are doing, they're basically saying, all those people of color, they're going to take your jobs, white people. That's what Steve Bannon and Donald Trump are saying. And that's what they've been saying since since after the Civil War. And on the left, if the Democratic Party, much like, again, referring back to Bernie during his campaign, he was saying, yes, of course, we've got to level a playing field. We've got to clean up what has happened in the past. We've got to do all this. But we also have to have economic policies that help absolutely everyone. And as long as there's a perception on the part of independent voters who voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump, and there were a lot of them, as long as there's that perception that the Democratic Party is not interested in their economic issues, but only in the economic issues of specific minority groups, which is not true, by the way, but it's the way that both the media, much of the media, particularly Fox News and right-wing hate radio, and the Republican Party are painting it, then to that extent, Steve Bannon is right, in my opinion. But the question, is this the end of Trump? For 2 days, I've been saying, okay, I think this is it. I think this time is different. I don't think this is like Access Hollywood. I think he's going down. And, we'll see, right? Obviously. But, what is it that he's coming down over? This is from Business Insider, by the way. The Associated Press limits its use of the term alt-right. At AP, we have taken the position that the term alt-right should be avoided because it is meant as a euphemism to disguise racist aims. That's from the Associated Press. And, Trump's tweet storm this morning. I mean, here's a couple of other things. Publicity-seeking Lindsey Graham. He's going to need Lindsey Graham, right? He doesn't have, if John McCain checks out of the Senate, we don't know how advanced his cancer is or what his treatment options are, but he may or may not be available for a lot of votes coming up. He's going to need every single Republican vote he's got. Or maybe not. Maybe he really is not in this to do anything other than just elevate his brand and then resign, say, screw it. You people don't get me. I'm just, See, that's what I think is going to happen. But anyhow, he tweeted, publicity-seeking Lindsey Graham falsely stated that I said there was a moral equivalency between the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists. Actually, that's not what Lindsey Graham said. He said that Trump said that there was a moral equivalency between those groups and the anti-fascists. But anyhow, actually, maybe there's a follow-up. And then he said, great to see that Dr. Kelly Ward is running against Jeff Flake, who is weak on borders, crime, and a non-factor in the Senate. He's toxic. These are both from this morning. So here's the President of the United States attacking two leading senators in his own party. How does that play out? Steve Bannon, I believe, made this call to Robert Kuttner, because he wanted to get the word out. The question is, why? It seems to me that John Kelly, who was just obviously very, very disheartened by Trump going off on his rant day before yesterday, that John Kelly has effectively, successfully put a wall between Donald Trump and Steve Bannon. He has become the gatekeeper of the Oval Office, and Trump clearly doesn't like it, and Bannon clearly doesn't like it. And I think that, frankly, Bannon called up Kuttner. This is just my opinion, but I think that he called up Kuttner and said, hey, let me tell you about this. Kuttner, by the way, is the editor. I'm not sure if he's the publisher, but he's the senior editor, the American Prospect, progressive magazine. I think he did this because he's trying to get around Kelly. He's trying to get these messages to the President of the United States. This is Bannon going to the press to talk to his boss, in my opinion. Or he's decided these guys are going down, and I'm not going to go down with them. Which brings us to another juicy little piece of information. Felix Slater. This is from an article over on by David Edwards over on Raw Story. Felix Slater, one of Donald Trump's shadiest former business partners, writes David Edwards, is reportedly preparing for prison time, and he says the president will be joining him behind bars. Well, don't count on that. He has the power of the pardon, and so will Mike Pence when he replaces him. But sources told The Spectator's Paul Wood that special counsel Robert Mueller's deep dive into Trump's business practices may be yielding results. The president had said, I mean, it's possible there's a condo or something, so, I'd sell a lot of condo units. Maybe somebody from Russia buys a condo. Who knows? Sater is the guy who was selling a lot of those condos. And this again, this isn't the Russian government. These are oligarchs who may not have made their money in the most ethical, honest, or legal way, and probably it goes way beyond Russian oligarchs. There's probably Saudi, in fact, we know that there are Saudi oligarchs in Trump Tower and others. Whether they need to launder money or not, I don't know. But what Felix Sater told New York Magazine, in about the next 30 to 35 days, I will be the most colorful character you've ever talked about. And believe me, it ain't anything as small as whether or not you're going to call me to the Senate committee. And there is also word that Paul Manafort has turned on Trump. So maybe he's just like, hey, screw it. I don't care. I'm just going to be me. I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. What do you think? I think it's possible. It seems like it's entirely possible. Media Matters, by the way, has a great piece. The headline is Trump's remarks defending neo-Nazis were full of right-wing media talking points. And it's not just right-wing media. It's almost all Fox News. Virtually everything Trump has said has been ripped from Fox News, particularly Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and Fox and Friends. This is, John Kelly. If you are General Kelly, if you are listening, the thing you need to do is not control access to the Oval Office, although that's not a bad idea. You need to take Fox. You need to call whoever's providing cable service to the White House and tell them to block out the Fox channel. And then maybe Trump will start behaving rationally. But right now, as long as he's believing a propaganda channel, we're all in big trouble.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And here's the absolute proof of that. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. All three networks have called all 52 Republican senators. None of them will come on television.
Welcome back. Oh, my, oh, my, oh, my. Denise in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Denise, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Remember the Trump acronym that I did? Trump stands for traitor, racist, unhinged, misogynistic Putin.
Yes. Okay.
He's done every one of those things, at least 4 out of 5 every day since he got elected.
So let's see.
Do you think maybe the Republicans are kind of starting to be more afraid of Pence, and that's why they're not moving on getting rid of Trump?
No, they're afraid of Trump, and this is how fascists govern, if you want to use that word, is by threats and intimidation. And I mean that's the core ideal of fascism, not just the merger of corporate and state interests, but as the Merriam-Webster dictionary said, combined with belligerent nationalism. In other words, bullying. And, you know, I think that they're afraid of him right now. A time will come when they're no longer afraid of him, and that's when his base, leaves him. But they haven't left yet. You still have a majority of Republicans who approve of Donald Trump.
Well, we better have a good election in 2018 where the Democrats really come forward, because if and when Trump leaves and we get stuck with Pence, that's just going to be horrible because he's going to be the policymaker.
Yeah. Although I think that Pence will have a whole heck of a lot harder time getting reelected. And, you know, there'll probably be a primary battle in the Republican Party. It's going to get very, very messy. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But I don't see it ending well. Denise, thanks for the call. It's a good one. Arnold in Macon, Georgia. Hey, Arnold, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I want to make a comment about how you just divided the different groups and what they stood for and how they became what they became. You know, these same white people fought the Civil War on the southern side to maintain the status quo, to keep slavery.
Yep.
And you know, slavery had all the jobs, and those same white people was eating crap barking at the moon because they had no jobs. So now they're doing the same thing now. They're trying to say, well, we want to keep our image or our heritage. Well, their southern heritage had slaves, which meant they had no jobs.
Right.
So in the same sense, Mr. Trump, who have companies overseas using slave labor to make his product, and his daughter, or in the Philippines, doing the same thing. Now they're following this man down a crap hole and don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Arnold. I think you're absolutely right. And these, it's amazing that you get these guys out here, who are at some level, and I don't think that this is really what's driving it. I think it's authoritarian personalities that are driving it. But, you know, they're also the victims of Reaganism and free trade. And which is why Bannon says, hey, you know, if we take these traditionally democratic positions of opposing free trade deals, you know, we are going to win elections. And he's right. But it's so bizarre to see these guys, out there, basically protesting their loss of economic power and blaming it on somebody other than the Republican Party who is responsible for it. It's incredible. Arnold, thank you for the call. Spot on. You nailed it. We'll be right back. Stick around.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Did you see this? How this Nazi... Ian Millhiser wrote about this over at the Center for American Progress's blog, Think Progress. Wunsiedel. Wunsiedel is a town of fewer than 10,000 people in Deutschland, in Germany. And once Rudolf Hess was buried there. And every year the Nazis would go there to make a pilgrimage to his grave. So in 2011, they dug up his grave and destroyed the grave and destroyed his body. And there's no Rudolf Hess anymore. But the Nazis still come to town. They can't, by German law, they can't have swastikas. They can't do Sieg Heil salutes. They can't say Sieg Heil. So instead, what they do is they march through town wearing black clothes and carrying solid green flags. Right? So this is how Nazis present themselves in Germany. So for 25 years, the people of Wunsiedel, gritted their teeth and watched as these Nazis marched through their town every year. And so what they did last year or 2 years ago, they came up with, they actually embraced the Nazi march through their town. They said, oh boy, the Nazis are coming to town. Let's call this Nazis Against Nazis. And along the march route, for every meter, for every 3 feet, every yard, basically, that a neo-Nazi walked, the town had found individual donors all around Germany, but mostly in the local area, who were willing to give 10 euros, $10 for every yard that a Nazi walked to an anti-Nazi organization. It's called Exit Deutschland. It's an organization that helps neo-Nazis and other right-wing extremists escape radicalism and build new lives. And so the residents then line up along the path with these milestones. Every 50 feet or so, you have raised $1,000 to stop the Nazis. You have raised $2,000 to stop the Nazis. And at the very end, there's a giant banner, 10,000 euros to fight Nazism. And with slogans, quick like a greyhound, tough like leather, and as generous as never before. Or if only the Fuhrer knew. And so another German town, Rammingen, deployed a similar tactic, and they did this just last year, and it cut their neo-Nazi march in half. So what do you think, guys? Strange stuff. Strange stuff. Is this the end of the Trump presidency? Is this the end of Donald Trump? What is next for the Republican Party? What's next for all of us? How do the Democrats work with this? What is our next step? It seems clear to me that, well, I've said it earlier. We'll be back with all of that right after.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And your calls as well, by the way. Another car hitting people as a terror attack, just like we had in Charlottesville, now in Spain. For the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading Locked Down, Locked Out, Why Prison Doesn't Work and How We Can Do Better by Maya Chenwar, who is, or was, I believe she still is, the publisher, or the editor, rather, over at truthout.org. This is from the introduction, the very beginning of the book. She uses a word I can't say on the air. I'll replace it with the word damn. Damn, 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 damn. I'm crying with my mother over the phone. It's late evening, December 25th, 2012, and Kayla, my only sister and best friend, has been arrested for the 7th time in the past 6 years. She's in jail again, and this time we're sort of hoping she'll stay there. If she asks, I tell Mom, I'm not bailing her out. Well, we're not, Mom says, her voice low and far away, a weary echo of words uttered in months and years past. If she's in there, at least she'll be safe. Jail, we agree, may be the only place that can save Kayla's life, staving off her burning dependency on heroin. Neither of us acknowledges that regardless of whether Kayla stays clean while incarcerated, sooner or later she'll be getting out. Do we know what she's in for, I asked Mom. Does it matter? I think of Kayla cuffed and listless, being dragged through the doors of the Cook County Jail, catching the eyes of women she's known before in court, on the street, in juvenile detention, in jail, in prison. I wonder whether a part of her is relieved to be back. Later, when I pick up the phone and hear a robotic voice announce, "You have a collect call from the Cook County Jail, press 5 to take the call," I press the hang-up button and get into bed. My attitude toward Kayla's incarceration was born out of desperation. She'd overdosed 3 times within 2 months, passing out on the street, awakening in abandoned buildings or crowded hospitals, her pulse barely ticking. Yet my wish chafed against not only my love for her, but also my politics, my ideals, my sense of justice and truth. After all, I run a social justice-based news organization and have denounced the colossus that is the prison industrial complex for as long as I can remember. For nearly a decade, I've corresponded with a number of people in prison as both interviewees and pen pals, and I've learned much from them about the violence and hopelessness of our system. My understandings of the power structures that create prisons have been guided by the work of people like activist and scholar Angela Davis, a staunch prison abolitionist. How could I reconcile my wholehearted opposition to the prison industrial complex with a desire to see my own sister locked up? When I look back on that time, I can only comprehend it by acknowledging the insidious, persistent role that prison occupied in my mind. It was closely connected to the role it occupies in larger society. Incarceration serves as the default answer to many of the worst social problems plaguing this country. Not because it solves them, but because it buries them. By isolating and disappearing millions of Americans, more than 2.3 million right now, making us the most incarcerated country on the planet, prison conveniently disappears deeply rooted issues that society, or rather those with power in society, would rather not attend to. Prison, writes Angela Davis, performs a feat of magic. As massive numbers of homeless, hungry, unemployed, drug-addicted, illiterate, and mentally ill people vanish behind its walls, the social problems of extreme poverty, homelessness, hunger, unemployment, drug addiction, illiteracy, and mental illness become more ignorable, too. But, as Davis notes, prisons do not disappear problems, they disappear human beings. And the caging and erasure of those human beings, mostly people of color and poor people, perpetuates a cycle in which large groups of people are cut off from mainstream society and denied the freedoms, opportunities, civil dignity, and basic needs that allow them a good life. In many jails and prisons, incarcerated people are tossed into a dank, dungeon-like solitary confinement cell when they are determined to have misbehaved. It's dubbed the hole. Isolated and dark, it shuts out almost all communication with fellow prisoners in the outside. Guards control the terms of confinement and the channels, if any, by which words can travel in and out. The whole presents a stark symbol of the institution of prison in its entirety, which functions on the tenets of disappearance, isolationism, and disposability. The solution to our social problems, the mechanism that's supposed to keep things together, amounts to destruction, the disposal of vast numbers of human beings, the breaking down of families, and the shattering of communities. Prison is tearing society apart. This country's most marginalized communities bear the overwhelming brunt of that devastation, but ultimately we are all caught up in the destruction as the politics of isolation ruptures the human bonds that could otherwise hold together a safer, healthier, and more just society. The behemoth that encompasses the prison is called by many names. The most meaningful ones, I think, are those that convey the pervasiveness of its power, the way it infects the world outside as well as the people within. Scholar and activist Beth Ritchie uses the term prison nation, describing it as, quote, a broad notion of using the arm of the law to control people, especially people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged communities, end quote. That control can take the form of prisons, jails, surveillance, policing, detention, probation, harsh restrictions on child guardianship, the militarization of schools, and other strategies of isolation and disposal, particularly deployed against poor communities of color, especially black communities. Others have used prison nation simply to demonstrate the system's vastness, how it infiltrates our culture and fuels our national politics, often in invisible ways. Prison industrial complex, PIC, is another key term. Rachel Herzing of the prison abolitionist group Critical Resistance defines it, and then she goes on through this. It's an extraordinary book, Locked Down, Locked Out by Maya Shen.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. At HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
And HartmannReport.com, our website, is sort of a news site where you can comment on things. But we've also created a podcast called The Hartmann Report. It's free, and it's on iTunes and presumably other places as well. I'm not sure where all we're TuneIn and Stitcher and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So just an FYI, it's a 1-hour podcast, which is sort of the best of the show. Just FYI. I just retweeted, cartoon is the wrong word, an illustration by John Hartzell of a kind of Victorian-looking woman talking to her daughter, saying I'm not sure that has anything to do with it. But anyway, she's saying a group of birds is called a flock, a group of fish is called a school, and a group of Trump supporters is called a clan. I love it. I love it. So, anyway. Elizabeth in Millsboro, Delaware. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Tom. My statement is about how you opened the show with this so-called alt-right, alt-left.
Right.
Here in Delaware, we have one station that covers the whole state, plus part of Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. There was a time when there was a progressive in the morning and a right-winger in the afternoon. Now we have two right-wingers. The woman in the morning refuses to take any calls from any of us who are opposed to Trump and his Klan activity. The one in the afternoon will take some of our calls, but he'll let you get one sentence out and then shut you down. Now, Sinclair Broadcasting, J.D. Hayworth, who's on Newsmax, One American News, all of these right-wing stations are just as bad as Fox because they all say the same thing.
Oh, some of them are actually worse. I mean, they go full born conspiracy theory crazy stuff.
Absolutely. But here's what I heard from a friend of mine who actually speaks on talk radio. He said that the right-wingers get some kind of a document every day, faxed to them. It's kind of like talking points, and they're all saying the same things all across the country.
Right.
Last night, I had an opportunity to listen to this crazy nut, Mark Levin. Mark Levin is obviously paid by the Russians. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, this guy is so supportive of the alt-right and the fascists, because that's what they are. But here's my question. In the AP, they said they're not going to call them alt-right anymore. What are we to call these people?
Racists, fascists, or Nazis?
Racist, fascists, and Nazis. Well, that kind of gets it all.
Yeah. I mean, let's just call them what they are. The whole point of the Associated...
I've been calling out those who continue to support Trump. If you're not a racist or a fascist, then why are you still supporting this man who is not really a Republican?
Right. And if you want to take it back, a year, if you're not a misogynist, if you're not, a crotch grabber, if you're not, the list just goes on and on. It's what Donald Trump's history is. I mean, let me just add something here to this, Elizabeth. The Baltimore Sun ran an article by Doug Donovan on August 16th. That would have been yesterday. The headline, Jared Kushner's firm seeks arrest of Maryland tenants to collect debt. Now, this is the Baltimore Sun, Baltimore, Maryland. The real estate company owned by Jared Kushner, son-in-law and top advisor to President Donald Trump, has been the most aggressive company in Maryland in using a controversial debt collection tactic, getting judges to order the arrest of people who owe his company money. Since 2013, the first full year in which the Kushner companies operated in Maryland, corporate entities affiliated with the firm's 17 apartment complexes in the state have sought the civil arrest of 105 former tenants for failing to appear in court to face allegations of unpaid debt, the Baltimore Sun has found. That's more than any other landlord in the state over that time. Court records show that 20 former Kushner attendants have been detained, in other words, arrested and put in jail. They call these arrests body attachments. It amounts to jailing people for being poor. And again, back to the Baltimore Sun, some tenants who have been targeted say they did not receive proper notice of the court appearances they were accused of missing. Advocates for consumer rights have long pushed for legislation to limit body attachments. And then they go on to say the Kushner companies have nearly 9,000 units in Maryland, most of them in Baltimore County. They generated at least $90 million in revenue annually. And last year they showed a $30 million profit.
And then they tell the story of Priscilla Moreno, a Baltimore County school bus driver who works part-time in video production, narrowly avoided arrest last year. She and her 3 children were living in Whispering Woods. This is one of Kushner's apartment buildings, 524 apartments. When she got a federal voucher that she thought would help her move up in the world. So she moved out of there and moved into a better place. Then the Kushner affiliate, J2 Westminster, hit her with $7,100 in judgment in 2015. She says it didn't credit her security deposit. She disputes the charges. She says they were charging me for things like carpet cleaning, normal wear and tear. And they damn near put her in jail. She avoided arrest by filing for federal bankruptcy, a step taken by at least a dozen other former tenants sued by Kushner affiliates. Forbes, by the way, estimates the Kushner family fortune at $2 billion. This, I mean, Mike Malloy used to refer to the Bush crime family. I'm starting. This is like the Trump crime family. Anyhow, back to you, Elizabeth.
It's an international syndicate.
Yeah, it really is.
There is no affordable housing anymore because what the Kushner family is doing is the same thing that corporations are doing all over this country, buying up big condos and then raising the rent so high that you could buy a house for what you're paying rent for.
Oh, it's insane. And it's not just big corporations. It's wealthy people. And it's also, China is and Chinese corporations are buying an awful lot of, and not just China. I mean, it's other countries as well that are very wealthy. Elizabeth, thank you for the call. Excellent point. John in Boston. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I haven't spoken to you in a while. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Well, like everybody. Yeah, I'm just, I'm picking up my jaw from the last few days. To get to the overall point that you started with, and during the break on free speech, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit. Is this it for Trump? You like to think so. But as you pointed out, and again, this doesn't apply to you, your listeners, and I think most people are good. But case in point, last night, CBS very quickly had a few Trump voters, and they said, does this change anything? Oh, I don't care. No, well, he's still my guy. I don't care. Right. And the word that came to me was apathy. And again, Trump really is the creation of this country. And you pointed out many times. The apathy, or maybe I don't care is a better way of saying it. Go back to Reagan, like you say. The cutbacks on education. People didn't say anything. Oh, I don't care. Oh, we don't need to know history. The Civil War, oh, that was a long time ago. Nazis, oh, that will never happen. I don't care. And then and then the whole idea of money, and it's all about me or whatever. And then voting. The changes started happening during the 90s and particularly 2000, obviously. Oh, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. So to answer your question, I hope to God that this is the wake-up call. But given history and given the programming, and the news, and you said it during the break, people who didn't listen to free speech. The news, we're fact, unlike your show is real news. I mean, most news has been fact-free. I mean, look at during the Trump campaign. It was all, let's get Trump on. He's a jokester or whatever. And look at where we are now. So I mean, it's really and climate change. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. I mean,
I'm not sure it's apathy, John. I think that for many people, it's that they have their agenda. Then they want Trump to promote. They think that he's going to bring economic prosperity. Or they think that he's going to put women in their place, to use their phrase, back in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant. They think that he's going to take America back to times of segregation. God only knows what they think, but that's, I think
You're
that they
listening
want that
to
stuff.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
John, thanks for the call. But yeah, I think you're also right about apathy. There's a tragic amount of that, which is what I'm trying to overcome every day here. Come on, wake up. And welcome back. Dave, watching Free Speech TV in Mississippi on the Dish Network. Hey, Dave, what's up? Dave?
Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes. I love your show. There's so much history. When people don't know their history, it's really sad. the Civil War and that Confederate flag. It was the rich plantation owners who owned my ancestors who sent the poor white boy off to fight the Civil War so that they could keep my people enslaved. Now, there's two books that were written in the last 15 years. One is called The Free State of Jones by Victoria Bynum, and the other is The State of Jones by Sally Jenkins and John Stausser. These books are based on fact. In fact, the movie came out last year, The Free State of Jones, and I suggest a lot of people watch that movie. Newt Knight was a poor white man who lived in Jones County, who did go off to fight the Civil War. And he realized that he did not own my people. So he came back and he did fight with the Union Army. But, you know, you go down to the city of Natchez. You know, do you know before the Civil War, Natchez was the richest city in this country?
That was because of the slave trade, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. That's in fact, the second largest slave auction block is at the Forks of the Road in Natchez. The largest one is over in Algiers, Lower Algiers in New Orleans. But I suggest that people go and read these books, The Free State of Jones and The State of Jones. It's based on fact, and I think the movie was on C-SPAN. No, not C-SPAN, I'm sorry. It was just recently on, what is it, you know, the satellite or whatever. But there's a lot of history, and if our people would only read. Thank you, Tom. I enjoy your show.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much for the call. Mike in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you? I was telling your screener that I had a premonition, and this may be a real downer, but I think that if Trump remains in office much longer, he will inflict a wound on human history from which humanity will never recover. Now, can I also add one thing? You were talking on the talk of fascism. People might not realize, but if you go back to a lot of the funding of the Republican Party through the Koch brothers and some of those other people who had ties to fascist, the John Birch Society, et cetera, et cetera. This has been a well-oiled, well-thought-out plan. So people better wake up, and like the lady just said, they better know their history.
Yeah, I wrote a book about this plan. The title of the book is The Crash of 2016, which here in 2017, it's not the best title for a book, but most of the book is about the Powell memo and the rise of the right wing from 1971 forward, and how we got where we are, and how that made both our economy and our body politic so brittle, so fragile, that we're just set up for a disaster. And of course, I wrote the book before Trump got into the White House, but it's pretty grim stuff. Mike, thanks for the call. Spot on. Spot on. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. JC in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, JC, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. A little nervous. I'm driving. I have an idea, and I don't know if you were talking about this before I was able to tune in, but I think the cities and municipalities that have these statues might be missing a great opportunity. It kind of fills in with what that German town did, which was great, about making money. They put these statues up open for public bid to remove. They can set an undisclosed minimum and have sealed bids that are publicly opened. That way you kind of serve three purposes. You could out who is wanting to take these statues. Two, you'd be taking cash from them, which always hurts. And three, the municipalities would be getting cash to actually do some good.
The analogy, JC, that I think we always need to pop into our minds and is the one of Germany. And the reason why is because, and this is why the Antifa people have been so aggressive even at small, small gatherings of 50 Nazis, is because, I mean, keep in mind, when Hitler took control of Germany, he only had about a 30% approval rating. He never won a majority. It's kind of a convoluted story, but the fascists don't need, because they're willing to bully people, and most people will be bullied. How many Republicans have spoken out using Donald Trump's name? To the best of my knowledge, zero. Right? Paul Ryan, John McCain, all these, Lindsey Graham, all these great noble guys who are tweeting out things like fascism is a terrible thing. None of them are saying, I disavow Trump. None of them are saying Trump is wrong. They're just all speaking in generality because they're afraid. And so, would Germany allow Nazi iconography in order to, or sell it for that matter, in order to raise money? No, because then it becomes, part of somebody's private collection, or it becomes part of a museum or whatever that celebrates Nazism. Somebody in my Twitter feed this morning suggested that we just grind away the person and leave the horse, and change the statue to, here once stood a statue of a disgraced traitor to the United States, Robert E. Lee, or whatever it may be, and a little bit of history, right? Here once stood the statue. That, maybe even a whole story about how, after Plessy versus Ferguson in 1898, a lot of these statues started appearing, and then there was another big revival of them after 1915, after Birth of a Nation, came out, and, that kind of stuff. Just, a little history lesson. That's a possibility, but I would say, I agree with the guy on Twitter. Grind off the guy sitting on the horse and just leave the horse there. JC, I hate to burst your bubble because you have a great idea. If the stakes weren't so high, if this wasn't like, respectfully, if this wasn't stuff that could literally end the republic. JC, thanks for the call. And let's not forget, Donald Trump has the ability to extinguish all life on this planet. He has the nuclear codes. He could start a nuclear war if he feels sufficiently tortured, if he feels sufficiently trapped. A rat in the corner is the most dangerous rat. And when you look at people who do basically kind of murder-suicides, which it would be if he were to start a nuclear war with North Korea, and thus with China, and ultimately probably even with Russia, or if he were to start a war with Iran, which could turn into a nuclear war with Russia. If Donald Trump was to do that, and he is doing the slower version of that, by the way. He's got, the toady for the fossil fuel industry, Scott Pruitt, running the EPA, doing away with regulations that prevent the emission of poisons and greenhouse gases. And, so he's killing the planet as it is. It's not quite as quickly as a nuclear war, but this is serious, serious stuff. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to chime in. My wife and I were watching the Vice News Tonight segment about the Unite the Right protests in Charlottesville, Virginia.
It's chilling, isn't it?
It was just truly scary. Just watching it. I'm scared for ourselves and for our children. Just at how overtly prejudiced and racist those guys were, and we're in a mixed race marriage, with mixed race children, and we're truly scared. There are parts of this country that we will not step foot in because of just the fever pitch of this alt-right movement. It really saddens me when I hear people refer to Black Lives Matter as a militant left-wing hate group. They aren't the Weather Underground. They're just people that just don't want to be harassed anymore.
Yep.
I
killed anymore.
I can't fathom how people can have that kind of mentality.
Yeah. No, this false equivalence is horrific. It really and truly is. Excellent point, Marty. Thank you for the call. Kabir in Boston. Hey, Kabir, what's up? Kabir? No Kabir. Okay, let's try Perry in Pensacola, Florida. Hey, Perry, what's on your mind?
Yes, sir. The other day, after I was watching our president, who is not in the White House, he's in every place else but the White House. We started to watch Leah Remini on her exposure of Scientology, and it seems like our president has taken a page or the whole book of how to treat people from that book.
Well, it's a generic category, Perry. If you're going to run a cult, here's how you do it. Here's how you do mind control. Here's how you slap people and then you kiss them, and then you slap them and then you kiss them. You keep them disoriented. You challenge their fundamental concepts of reality continually. You continually distract them from what's going on. The things that Trump is doing are the things that Jim Jones did. They're the things that cult leaders have fine-tuned over the years. Hitler did it. Tojo did it. These were cults also. And this is the danger of a cult leader leading a country. Very, very. History shows that the outcome is never good. Perry, excellent point. Thank you for the call. Tim in Messick, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I'd like to address a couple issues about the injustice system in this country, and I would also like to relate 3 personal stories.
Tim, you have 1 minute. What's up?
Oh, geez. Anyway, okay.
We ask people to call with one topic.
It's funny when O.J. Simpson, who they suspected of murder, they follow, for miles and miles. And, he gets a trial and all that and gets let go. Why? Because he's rich. Then you got a guy who's just pulling into a gas station and tries to produce his ID, and he gets shot. It's not...
Because he's black. Yeah.
It's about class. If you're poor or if you're black, you go to jail. If you're rich... Oh, you get acquitted because, what do they call that? Not guilty by affluenza, that Texas kid.
Right.
Or the guy, he's a...
Well, that was my point earlier. That was where I was saying Steve Bannon was right. That the Republicans and Fox News and right-wing hate radio try to characterize the Democratic Party as only talking about race. And the Democratic Party is talking about race and class, talking about identity politics and economics at the same time, which is a healthy thing. Bannon is trying to do the same thing. He's talking about identity politics and economics at the same time, only in the context of the victimhood of white people rather than trying to bring up people who have been the victims of white people. So it's a very disingenuous strategy on the right. But, yeah, I'm with you, Tim. Very, very well said. Thanks a lot for the call. We will be back. Stick around. We're going to continue our conversation. Americans for Tax Fairness is now out with their thoughts on what Trump is going to try to do with his tax cuts. By the way, is this the end of the market boom? I'll tell you about that after the break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Naomi Klein's brilliant new book, This Changes Everything. This from the introduction. A voice came over the intercom. Would the passengers of Flight 3935, scheduled to depart Washington, D.C. for Charleston, South Carolina, kindly collect their carry-on luggage and get off the plane? They went down the stairs and gathered on the hot tarmac. Then they saw something unusual. The wheels of the U.S. Airways jet had sunk into the black pavement as if it was wet cement. The wheels were lodged so deep, in fact, that the truck that came to tow the plane away couldn't pry out loose. The airline had hoped that without the added weight of the plane's 35 passengers, the aircraft would be light enough to pull. It wasn't. Someone posted a picture. Why is my flight canceled? Because D.C. is so damn hot that our planes sank 4 inches into the pavement. Eventually, a larger, more powerful vehicle was brought in to tow the plane, and this time it worked. The plane finally took off 3 hours behind schedule. The spokesperson for the airline blamed the incident on very unusual temperatures. The temperatures in the summer of 2012 were indeed unusually hot, as they were the year before and the year before. And it's no mystery why this has been happening. The profligate burning of fossil fuels, the very thing that U.S. Airways was bound and determined to do, despite the inconvenience presented by a melting tarmac. This irony, the fact that the burning of fossil fuels is so radically changing our climate that it's getting in the way of our capacity to burn fossil fuels, did not stop the passengers of Flight 3935 from re-embarking and continuing their journeys. Nor was climate change mentioned in any of the major news coverage of the incident. I'm in no position to judge these passengers. All of us who live high consumer lifestyles, wherever we may happen to reside, are metaphorically passengers on Flight 3935. Faced with a crisis that threatens our survival as a species, our entire culture is continuing to do the very thing that caused the crisis, only with an extra dose of elbow grease behind it. Like the airline bringing in a truck with a more powerful engine to tow that plane, the global economy is upping the ante from conventional sources of fossil fuels to even dirtier and more dangerous versions. Bitumen from the Alberta tar sands, oil from deepwater drilling, gas from hydraulic fracking, coal from detonated mountains, and so on. Meanwhile, each supercharged natural disaster produces new irony-laden snapshots of a climate increasingly inhospitable to the very industries most responsible for its warming, like the 2013 historic floods in Calgary that forced the head offices of the oil companies mining the Alberta tar sands to go dark and send their employees home, while a train carrying flammable petroleum products teetered on the edge of a disintegrating rail bridge. Or the drought that hit the Mississippi River 1 year earlier, pushing water levels so low that barges loaded with coal and oil were unable to move for days while they waited for the Army Corps of Engineers to dredge a channel. They had to appropriate funds allocated to rebuild from the previous year's historic flooding along the same waterway. Or the coal-fired power plants in other parts of the country that were temporarily shut down because the waterways that they draw into cooler machinery were either too hot or too dry, or in some cases, both. Living with this kind of cognitive dissonance is simply part of being alive in this jarring moment of history, when a crisis that we have been studiously ignoring is hitting us in the face. And yet we're doubling down on the stuff that caused the crisis in the first place. I denied climate change for longer than I care to admit. I knew it was happening, sure, and not like Donald Trump and the Tea Party years going on about how the continued existence of winter proves it's all a hoax. But I stayed pretty hazy on the details and only skimmed most of the news stories, especially the really scary ones. I told myself the science was too complicated and that the environmentalists, they're dealing with it. And I continue to behave as if there was nothing wrong with the shiny card in my wallet attesting to my elite frequent flyer status. A great many of us engage in this kind of climate change denial. We look for a split second and then we look away. Or we look but then turn it into a joke. More signs of the apocalypse, which is another way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves comforting stories about how humans are clever and will come up with a technological miracle that will safely suck the carbon out of the skies or magically turn down the heat of the sun. which I was to discover while researching this book, is yet another way of looking away. Or we try to look, we look, but try to be hyper-rational about it. Dollar for dollar, it's more efficient to focus on economic development than climate change, since wealth is the best protection from climate extremes, weather extremes. As if having a few more dollars will make much difference when your city is underwater, which is a way of looking away if you happen to be a policy wonk. Or we look but tell ourselves we're too busy to care about something so distant and abstract, even though we saw the water in the subways in New York City and the people on the rooftops in New Orleans, and know that no one is safe, the most vulnerable least of all. And though perfectly understandable, this too is a way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves that all we can do is focus on ourselves, meditate and shop at farmers markets and stop driving, but forget trying to actually change the systems that are making the crisis inevitable, because that's too much bad energy and it'll never work. And at first it may appear as if we are looking, because many of these lifestyle changes are indeed part of the solution, but we still have one eye tightly shut. Or maybe we look, really look, but then inevitably we seem to forget. Remember and then forget again. Climate change is like that. It's hard to keep in your head for very long. We engage in this odd form of on again, off again ecological amnesia for perfectly rational reasons. We deny it because we fear that letting in the full reality of this crisis will change everything. And we are right. And the book is This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, so to talk about the market, I mentioned as we hit the break that my sense is that the worm is about to turn, as they say. The economy has been held together since the crash of 2008, basically by baling wire and bubble gum. The baling wire is the inflation, the pouring of money by the Fed into the economy. And, they do this by buying so-called toxic assets, in other words, bad loans from banks and, bonds and CDOs and things like that. And they also buy treasuries as a way of, inflating the money supply and injecting money into our economy. So the Fed has been artificially holding down borrowing rates so that companies and giant corporations and very, very wealthy individuals can borrow money at basically 1% or less. And then those corporations are very glad to loan it to you and me for 29 or 32% or more. Some of them are even running in, the payday lending business, where it's 500% a year. And it's very, very profitable for these wealthy people and these big corporations, but it basically screws America. A report came out yesterday that we are $1.2 trillion in debt in the United States just with, revolving credit, with credit card debt and things like that, which is, something that we've never seen before, that level of debt. We have now surpassed where we were in 2008. And to a large extent, the debt that we had then caused the crash. So the baling wire is basically the free money. The bubble gum that has been holding the economy together is psychological. And, it's essentially Wall Street's belief that Donald Trump is going to help out Wall Street. Keep in mind, Wall Street, the state of the Dow, the state of the Standards and Poor, these are not reflections of the health of our economy. They are reflections of the ability of very, very wealthy people to keep inflating the value of their investments. But also keep in mind that when the stock market goes down, very wealthy people make out like bandits too. In fact, this is something that, I wish that when I was a kid, my dad had sat me down and taught me. And, you know, if you have children, you may want to sit your kids down and tell them this, that every 5, 6, 7, 8, at the very most 9 years, between every 6 and 9 years, capitalism fails. It has always done this. This is how Warren Buffett got insanely rich. You don't have to absolutely time the market. All you have to know is every 6, 7, 8, 9 years, every cycle, the market's going to fall. It won't necessarily be a depression, but it'll be a drop. And then if you buy like crazy on that drop, then you ride it back up to the top over the next 5 or 6 years, and then you sell. So buy low, sell high, right? We've heard this for years. It actually is true. And if I had just started doing this with, you know, a few $100s when I was 20 years old, I'd be insanely rich right now. And like I said, this is how Warren Buffett became one of the richest guys in the world, is basically just doing this. You buy stocks when the market is going up, when it's from the bottom as it's going up, and you sell them when it hits the top and starts going back down. So the psychology of the market is, hey, it's still going up, it's still going up. Now, why is it still going up, still going up? Because the psychology of the market is tied into this belief that stocks will benefit when rich people have more money. Now, why would stocks benefit when rich people have more money? Because, you know, rich people aren't buying more stuff. The founder of the Patriotic Millionaires on this program a couple of years ago, you know, he said, Tom, how many pairs of pants do you have? And I'm like, I don't know, you know, 6, 8, 9, something like that. And he's like, yeah, me too. But I have 10,000 times more money than you do. But I don't need 10,000 times more pants. So if rich people get more money, why would that cause the stock market to go up? Because they're not going to buy more stuff. And buying more stuff is what stimulates demand in the marketplace, and that demand is what makes money for corporations. So why is it that rich people getting more money makes the market go up? Because they need some place to put that money. So, you know, what's been happening is that the very, very wealthy in this country have been just sucking down the cash ever since Reaganomics was put into place. And in fact, you really want to have your eyes pop out of your head. Just, you know, go on the internet and track down a chart of the stock market from 1960 to today, or 1950 to today. And yeah, slow and steady rise through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then we got into the Reaganomics era, where rich people started getting really insanely rich, really, really fast. And you look at the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s and now, and the stock market has just exploded. It's almost a logarithmic rise. Why? Because rich people have all that more money and they need to put it someplace, so they put it in the stock market. So you've got the baling wire and the bubble gum, right, or the barbed wire and the bubble gum holding the economy together. The cheap money, the free money, and the psychology. And Janet Yellen has been signaling, you know, it's time to dial back the free money. But she also knows that the minute she starts doing that in a really serious and consequential way, you know, we don't raise it 100 basis points. It's 100 hundredths of a point, or 100,000th of a point. Instead, we're going to raise it, you know, 500 basis points. We're going to raise it a whole half a point, the interest rates, or we're going to raise them a whole point. At that point, it becomes much more expensive to borrow for big corporations, and so they cut back on their borrowing, and this unravels the, number one, it reduces the money supply, because the money supply in the United States is literally loaned into existence by banks. When our money supply expands, it's because banks are doing more lending. When our money supply contracts, which happens with every recession, it's because banks are doing less lending. Banks create our money. They're sitting on $1 million in deposits. That means they can loan out $10 million. When they loan out, you know, the $10 million, $9 million just got created out of thin air, just as a bookkeeping entry on the bank's books. So this is the system. So now what comes along? So the belief has been that Republicans having the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the Supreme Court means that they will be able to successfully cut taxes on rich people even more and cut taxes on big corporations so they can shovel more of that money passing through to rich people. So rich people will get even richer and have to put their money in the stock market. So the stock market is continually going up in anticipation of this. So what happens if you've followed all this and you get all, where we're at right now and how we got here and why? What happens when the psychology falls apart? We just covered what happens when the free money falls apart. What happens if the Fed dials back? Well, Janet Yellen is, going very slow on this. I would be surprised to see an interest rate hike by the end of the year. But Janet Yellen is supposed to be replaced next year at the beginning, I believe it's in January. The Donald Trump has an opportunity to appoint a new Fed chair. Now, is it going to be Yellen or is it going to be some right-wing crank? If he puts some right-wing crank in there and they start messing with interest rates, boom, we're in a depression. Because that's the bailing wire, right? The bubblegum part of it is this, and this is huge. And I've kind of buried the lead here because this is where I was starting, the psychology of the marketplace. And that is that if the market comes to believe that Donald Trump has so screwed up things, he's got, he's angered his own Republican senators. He's tweeting out this morning against Jeff Flake and Lindsey Graham. If he has so screwed things up that he can't get his tax cuts passed, then rich people are not going to get that extra $1 trillion that they're going to put in the stock market. So the stock market's not going to go up another $1 trillion. And when that happens, this wildly overvalued stock market is going to start to collapse. So this is my prediction of what's going on. And I think that, frankly, we're at that moment right now. Now, this is just my opinion, and I've been so wrong on the stock market so many times. Please don't make investment decisions based on what I'm saying. But I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, okay, the money supply thing is like, it's so fragile. And the psychology thing is just about to fall apart. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So your thoughts on where we are financially, too. And, wow, a line of residents in Durham, North Carolina trying to turn themselves in. I got to tell you about this after the break. And welcome back. Mark in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV.
How you doing, Tom?
Fine.
I think we have the same problem they had in Germany. I think that the Republicans think they can control Trump, and now that he's in office, I think the same thing that happened when it happened in Germany is they're being controlled by two factors, greed and fear. I think with Hitler it was more fear than greed. I think with Trump it's more greed than fear, but that could change.
Yeah, I agree. And greed and fear are like these, the two ends of the baton, as it were. It's and the balance goes back and forth. But yeah, I think that's a great analogy. And the fear is why there are no Republicans willing to come on television. There's no Republicans willing to come on this program. Of course, that's been the case for years and years. There's no Republicans right now. When was the last time you saw an elected Republican on television, Mark?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I think that if we don't get them out, like greed is still the main factor, the main motivating force.
Right.
If it actually switches to where it's fear, totally fear, it's going to be a lot harder to get them out.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's an excellent point. And frankly, again, look at Franco's Spain, look at Mussolini's Italy, look at Hitler's Germany. For analogies to that, or Pinochet's Chile, or fascism takes a whole lot of different forms. Mark, thank you for the call. Don, watching Free Speech TV in York, Pennsylvania. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah.
You're on the air. What's up?
I got a book that I'm reading, and I wanted some information about this guy that wrote it. The book is Change Everything by Christian Felber.
I'm not familiar with it. I'm sorry.
You're not familiar with him?
No.
He's an Austrian alternative, what would you call it, economist, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to change everything. And I've always believed, I'm 88 years old, and things have been going downhill steady. And I feel like anything is better than what we got. And
well, be careful of that. I mean,
changing everything would be a good thing.
Yeah, anything is better than what we got is what got Trump elected. People thinking that, you know, the system is not working for me and Hillary Clinton is just more of the system, so I'm going to vote for the guy who's the anti-system, which was Trump. And, you know, had Bernie been in that race, I think he would have taken those votes, but he wasn't. And so, Don, I understand what you're saying, but things could get a hell of a lot worse.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And I think if it's left alone, it will get worse. And that's what makes me think that, I mean, this guy is not, the only thing that worries me is it's under the premise that most people are good at heart and other people aren't. And I don't believe that. I think most people are not good.
Don, are you, you said you're 88. Are you old enough? Do you remember World War II?
Yes, I do.
Were there, well, I'm running out of time. I'm hitting the break here. Don, I hope we can talk again sometime. Give me a shout, and I'd like to ask you some questions about what it was like back then. My own father's no longer with us, and I don't know very many people who remember World War II. But I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I have no control over that. Don, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Welcome back. Paul in Chicago. Hey, excuse me, Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. You mentioned Rudolf Hess, and I note that this is the 30th anniversary, such as is, of his death, only 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird story, but a dear friend of mine in Germany had been a soldier in Hitler's army, a conscript. He was not a fan of the Nazis, but he was a fervent Christian. And after the war, he was trying to figure out who are the least of the least. You know, Jesus said, visit those in prison. And once a year, he went to Spandau and visited Rudolf Hess. He was the only person who ever visited Rudolf Hess to the best of his knowledge. And it always, you know, I always felt very conflicted about that. But I know a lot about Rudolf Hess. Anyhow, back to you, Paul.
Well, the hashtag of my call is, and as I told the screen, Nate, was what are the surprises about Trump, other than he's a lot worse than we thought, at least a lot worse than I ever thought.
Yeah.
I thought, Tom, that it would be kind of like the Bush presidency. Well, we'd rock along and life would seem normal, and about a couple times a month something outrageous would happen and we'd all go out of our minds. I didn't expect daily chaos.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you something. Back at Michigan State, there was, speaking of Germany, there was a professor, probably a little after your time. His name was Kenneth Walzer. He taught in the James Madison College. He was very popular. I didn't have him as a professor, but people used to show up to his class, as I did with a student, another roommate of mine. He talked about the Holocaust, and his big message about the Holocaust was, don't think that this is ancient history just because this took place 20, 25 years before you were all born.
Right.
He said, this can happen again. It can happen again anywhere.
Yep.
It can happen again here. And I have to tell you something. My mother's family came from Germany in 1925 because my great-grandparents recognized that Germany was in a whole lot of hurt. Adolf Hitler was in prison in 1925, and they were afraid of him there.
Yep.
And all of his cohorts, that they knew, my great-grandparents knew that Germany was heading down that road 8 years before Hitler ever came to power. And so what I'm trying to say here is that if the Democrats, liberals, progressives were disimpassioned in 2016, we were losing. What reason did we have to come out to vote in 2016? Because we were already in the quicksand. The stonewalling of Barack Obama's presidency was the canary in the coal mine.
Yep.
As to where we were going.
And Merrick Garland
and
all the other crimes committed by Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, and if stonewalling and Neil Gorsuch, they knew this was all taking place. I'm half convinced that the whole Republican Party is part of this conspiracy. But if we don't see a turnout in 2018 by Democrats that is completely cannot be, but that no voter suppression can quell.
Right, blow out the walls.
Massive turnout.
Yeah.
Then I'm sorry about this country. I think this country will have to go down, hit rock bottom the way Germany did before we figure out where we are.
Well, and that may not be a terrible thing. It'll be a painful thing. It'll be an awful thing. But, you know, the Iroquois Confederacy figured out how to have peace after having too many brutal wars. I mean, they just finally said that's enough. No more wars. The Germans got there. The Japanese got there. You know, and also, we're one of the few countries in the world that does not forbid Nazi iconography, and we do it in the name of the First Amendment. But I'm wondering if, you know, even the First Amendment, protection of free speech, does not protect you from hate speech and from, you know, the old cliche, you know, yelling fire in a crowded theater. How is carrying a swastika down the street not the equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded theater, given the kind of power now that the fascists have in this country?
Well, hey, Tom, recall what the case was. That was the Schenck case, where the crying movie fire in a crowded theater was. It was throwing communist pamphlets off a building in New York. So it was. That's the way the United States reacted to it then.
Wow, I did not realize that. That was
all about.
So throwing. Wow. What was the name of that case, Paul?
That was I think it was the Abrams case, 1919.
Abrams, 1919. I'm going to have to look it up. Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the. Today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University, we're reading from what is apparently Donald Trump's second favorite book. His number one, according to his first wife, as I recall, was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which was on his bed next to his, or on his bedstand next to his bed for years. But when he was asked by reporters his favorite book, he said P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money. So I thought, hey, let's check this out. This is from the introduction. Those who really desire to attain an independence, but have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means, as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. But however easy it may be found to make money, I have no doubt many of my hearers will agree it is the most difficult thing in the world to keep it. The road to wealth is, as Dr. Ben Franklin truly says, as plain as the road to the mill. It consists simply in expending less than we earn. That seems to be a very simple problem. Mr. Micawber, one of those happy creations of the genial Dickens, puts the case in a strong light when he says that to have an income of 20 pounds per annum and spend 20 pounds and 6 pence is to be the most miserable of men, whereas to have an income of only 20 pounds and spend but 19 pounds and 6 pence is to be the happiest of mortals. Many of my readers may say, we understand this. This is economy, and we know economy is wealth. We know we can't eat our cake and keep it also. Yet I beg to say that perhaps more cases of failure arise from mistakes on this point than almost any other. The fact is, many people think they understand economy when they really do not. True economy is misapprehended, and people go through life without properly comprehending what that principle is. One person says, I have an income of so much, and here's my neighbor who has the same, yet every year he gets something ahead and I fall short. Why is it? I know all about economy. Well, he thinks he does, but he does not. There are many who think that economy consists in saving cheese parings and candle ends. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 1900s. In cutting off 2 pence from the laundress's bill and doing all sorts of little mean, dirty things. Economy is not meanness. The misfortune is also that this class of persons let their economy apply in only one direction. They fancy that they are so wonderfully economical in saving a half penny where they ought to spend 2 pence that they think they can afford to squander in other directions. A few years ago, before kerosene oil was discovered or thought of, one might stop overnight at almost any farmer's house in the agricultural districts to get a very good supper. But after supper, he might attempt to read in the sitting room and would find it impossible with insufficient light from just one candle. The hostess, seeing his dilemma, would say, it is rather difficult to read here in the evenings. The proverb said, you must have a ship at sea in order to be able to burn 2 candles at once. We never have an extra candle except on extra occasions. Those extra occasions occur perhaps twice a year. In this way, the good woman saves $5, $6, or $10 in that time, but the information which might be derived from having an extra candle would, of course, far outweigh a ton of candles. But the trouble does not end there. Feeling that she is so economical in tallow candles, she thinks she can afford to go frequently to the village and spend $20 or $30 for ribbons and furloughs, many of which are not necessary. This false economy may frequently be seen in men of business, and in those instances, it often runs to paper writing. You find good businessmen who save all the old envelopes and scraps and would not tear a new sheet of paper if they could avoid it for the world. This is all very well. They may in this way save $5 or $10 a year, but being so economical only in note paper, they think they can afford to waste time, to have expensive parties, and to drive their own carriages. This is an illustration of Dr. Franklin's, quote, saving at the spigot and wasting at the bunghole, or penny wise and pound foolish. Punch, in speaking of this one-idea class of people, says, they are like the man who bought a penny herring for his family's dinner and then hired a coach and 4 to take it home. I never knew a man who succeeded by practicing this kind of economy. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer if necessary. Dispense with a new pair of gloves. Mend the old dress. Live on plainer food if need be. So that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. Penny here, $1 there, placed at interest, goes on accumulating, and in this way the real desire is attained. It requires some training perhaps to accomplish this economy, but once used to it, you will find there is more satisfaction in rational saving than in irrational spending. Here's a recipe which I recommend. I have found it to work an excellent cure for extravagance and especially for mistaken economy. When you find that you have no surplus at the end of the year and yet have a good income, I advise you to take a few sheets of paper and form them into a book and mark down every item of expenditure. Post it every day or week in 2 columns, one headed necessities, the other comforts, and the other headed luxuries. And you will find that the latter column will be double, triple, and frequently 10 times greater than the former. The real comfort of life costs but a small portion of what most of us can earn. Dr. Franklin said, it is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us. If all the world were blind except myself, I should not care for fine clothes and furniture. It is the fear of what Mrs. Grundy may say that keeps the noses of most worthy families to the grindstone. In America, many persons like to repeat, we are all free and equal. But it is a great mistake in more senses than one. That we are born free and equal is a glorious truth in one sense, yet we are not all born equally rich, and we never shall be. So anyhow, the book is The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money by P.T. Barnum. It's actually a pretty good book. We'll be
Welcome back. George in Delray Beach, Florida. Hey, George. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me on the show, a first-time caller.
Thank you.
I was calling about revitalizing the Democratic Party, and I think I was into your show yesterday or the day before, and you were talking about how there are Democrats, that are progressive and aren't, taking corporate money and things like that. But I'm talking more, I'd like to hear more from the leadership of the Democratic Party, and maybe I haven't, maybe you know more about it, to denounce Citizens United, to take money out of politics, because right now we're fighting a losing battle. We cannot win this battle if we continue to try to appease to corporate America, because we need the money to run elections. That money can go towards jobs. That money can go towards getting better teachers, towards getting better education. But we're spending over $1 billion per election cycle on nonsense. And I just want to hear your thoughts on, where do you see the Democratic Party from the leadership, not from the little guys, from the leadership, from Nancy Pelosi, from people who are in the leadership? How are they
Tom Perez
sending out this message to take money out of politics, to end Citizens United, and just have public funded elections?
It's got to be a really tough one. I'm not a party to the inside discussions in the Democratic Party, although we hear about such things when Keith Ellison, who's the number 2 guy in the Democratic Party, comes on the program, or Mark Pocan comes on and tells us what's going on. But I would think it's got to be really tough. During the Obama presidency, President Obama directed the DNC not to take corporate money donations. That ended when the Clinton campaign won the primary, and I believe, and has been ended ever since then, or at least from some point in the election. I'm pretty sure that's when it was, and which is not to villainize the Clinton campaign. This is the danger in this post-Citizens United world, is that the Supreme Court has changed the rules of the game. And, they've basically said it's no longer a knife fight, it's now a machine gun fight. And so, you bring a machine gun, you can participate in this fight, but you bring a knife to a machine gun fight, you're going to get mowed down. And the machine gun, of course, is money. And now that the Supreme Court has changed the rules, people, like Bernie has the luxury in Vermont, of just doing retail politics. There's only 600,000 people in Vermont, and probably 3/4 of them have shaken Bernie's hand at one point or another in their lives. You can't do that in the state of California or the state of New York, and you actually have to raise money if you're gonna run for office. And the unions have been so effectively killed or neutered or eviscerated by Reaganomics, that there's just not a lot of money, and there's not a lot of progressive billionaires out there, and the ones who are not anywhere close to the wealth and having the means for the largesse that we see with the Mercers and the Kochs and the Waltons with inherited money and things like that. So it's a really tough one, and I would like to see the party much more aggressively speaking out about money in politics. But they're a little conflicted on that, because there are some people in the party who are taking a lot of money. So it's a tough one, George. I think that we start running purity tests and being all black and white on this issue at our own risk, at our own peril. On the other hand, I also believe that people detect genuineness, and that a candidate who says, I'm not going to take corporate money, as Bernie did in the primary, is going to draw a lot of attention, a lot of favorable attention. And in fact, Trump was saying the same thing. He's not taking money from anybody who's rich. Now, he was lying. And, the Mercers and Adelson and others, I mean, he was getting a lot of help. But his supporters believed that he did it with his own money, or he did it on his own. So money in politics is a huge issue. George, you got to move along, but thank you for the call. Barbara in Seattle. Hey, Barbara, what's on your mind today?
I think it's about time people understand that you get what you subsidize. In this country, we've done everything wrong because we did 2 things right after the Second World War. You know what they were. We did 2 things right after the Second World War immediately.
I'm
You know
listening.
what they were?
I can't guess what you're thinking.
Marshall Plan and the GI Bill.
Okay.
Perfect. The Eleanor Roosevelt platform of the Democratic Party.
Yep.
I have been working in the Democratic Party for 60 years, and I've been doing my precinct. Every month I go to a Democratic meeting. It's been pure torture because nobody understands the ABCs of the American monetary system. Wright Patman wrote a 4-page piece of paper, and I spent my money handing it out, and I lost my last copy of it. And Ellen Brown, the
Web of Dead. Yes.
And then the other one is Yanis Varoufakis, Global Minotaur. People have got to understand that every government is capitalism. All governments make money, legal, and allocate capital. It's a question of whether they do it democratically or as National Socialism, which, do you know who the Pools wrote the book, Who Financed Hitler? Have you ever heard of that book?
I'm about halfway through Fritz Tyson's book, I Financed Hitler, or words to that effect.
Poole wrote this, the two Poole, the husband and wife wrote this book a long time ago. And the thing is that people don't understand, and of course there's a new book out by a right-winger saying it was the labor unions, that supported Hitler. Well, actually, it's just like the CIA took over the labor unions and the so-called democratic processes in all the country. In other words, I don't want to take any more of your time, but the point is that after the Second World War, and you know who wrote Arms of Krupp? Krupp was 500 years of building up Germany with good steel.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have done is we took the Nazis from the space program and and had them take over both our space program and develop our OSS into the CIA.
Right.
And
Werner von Braun et al. Yes.
All we had to do is treat our allies in the Second World War, which is most of the world, the way we treated our enemies, and that is to subsidize them with democratic capitalism. We chose to do exactly the opposite because we had Dulles and all of the CIA people decide that what the United States need to do was to subsidize corporate crime. Corporate crime.
Well, that's what we've been doing all along. And I would say that, after we had taken down the governments of Afghanistan and Iraq, had we done the equivalent of the Marshall Plan and then just gotten the heck out of town, we might have had a very different outcome, too. Although the problem is that both those countries know that they were invaded for purposes that had nothing to do with, what their government was doing. And, whereas Germany and Japan, when we finally beat them in the war, it kind of woke people up from the death cult of Nazism and Japanese fascism. So, but all excellent points, Barbara. Excellent points. Thank you very much. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. It is 43 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls, and we're going to check in with Talk Media News, too, in just a minute. Welcome back. Rose in Mansfield, Ohio. Hey, Rose, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a first-time caller. I'm very excited about this. I used to watch you on the news years ago.
Well, thank you, Rose.
I'm sorry?
Thank you, Rose. So what's
Yes,
on your mind?
I did. And I always watch you, but I have some points. I know there are other callers. Now, I'm not going to be as eloquent as your other callers, but I have points that I think
I'm sure you'll do a fine job. Let's get right to it.
Okay. People are not as nice as what they used to be. That's one thing.
Okay.
I remember some of the war. I remember the blackouts. I remember the rations. I remember the end of war parade. I remember going to the movies and seeing Hitler and the Nazis, and I was terrified, and I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie that one person talked about, The Free State of Jones, I have seen that on HBO. The other one is a remake, and I can't recall the name.
These are about Jim
yes,
Jones and his
good.
going down to British Guyana and all that stuff?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Now, another point I just want to say, I think after two sessions in Congress, they need to retire. They're living off of our money in Congress for years and years and telling their grandson, go to law school and I'll get you a seat. If you watch them, they're on their phone. They're falling asleep. They're not paying attention. They need to go home and retire. A couple terms and you're out.
The problem with that, Rose, is that when you don't have an institutional knowledge in an institution like the House or the Senate, then, so a freshman comes in, a new member, somebody just gets elected. They come in, and typically what they do is they attach themselves to somebody who's been there for a long time who will show them the ropes, tells them where the bodies are buried, tells them how legislation is created, tells them the processes. And some of these processes are quite arcane, particularly in the Senate, how these things happen. So everybody kind of attaches themselves to a mentor. When there's no longer people who've been in office 15, 20, 25 years around to tell you how things work, then they get replaced by the lobbyists, because the lobbyists are here forever. The lobbyists, there's people, lobbyists in this town have been lobbying for 30, 40 years, and they become the institutional memory. And then you end up with a government that's run of, by, and for the lobbyists and not of, by, and for we the people. So that's why I'm opposed to term limits, respectfully.
Okay. Now, I'm keeping a scrapbook. I cut out the pictures out of the newspaper, many of them about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
When he was elected, I cut a picture out of him. I wrote on this picture, buffoon, this is for me, buffoon, liar, unfit, taker, racist, bully.
Wow, you nailed it early on. Rose, we're hitting a break here. I'm out of time, but thank you for calling and sharing your thoughts and memories and sentiments with us. Spot on. It's a great call. You did a great job your first call. Thank you so much, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, a new book by Ellen Ratner. On the line with us is Victoria Jones of Talk Media News. Hey, Victoria.
Hi, Tom.
So, terror attack in Barcelona, do they know who did it?
No, they don't seem to know who did it yet. Obviously, they are treating it as terrorism. They say at least one person died and 32 were injured, at least 10 seriously, after a van plowed into crowds in Barcelona's famous La Ramblas tourist area. The van sped along the pedestrianized area, literally just mowing down people and sending others fleeing for cover into shops and cafes. The witnesses said that the van deliberately targeted people before coming to a stop.
Whoa. I gave a presentation in Barcelona 5-6 years ago, along with a German legislator who has since passed away, who is one of the two guys who did the 100,000 rooftops thing, you know, that solarized Germany.
Yeah.
And Louise and I sat right in the middle of that. There's that long thoroughfare that goes right down to the ocean there in Barcelona. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. You know, the tree-lined streets and these old buildings on the side and all these restaurants running down the center, you know, where you can sit and eat. And I've been there. It's weird. That's where the killing is going on. That's incredible.
Yeah, quite extraordinary. This is becoming a thing. I mean, you know, it's becoming like the weapon of choice now.
Well, ISIS has been advocating this for a couple of years, and there's been, what, 6 or 7 of these attacks done by ISIS, and then now we've got Nazis doing it in the United States. I'm wondering if this was a Nazi attack or an ISIS attack.
Well, you know, I mean, if you see it being used and you see it being used effectively, why not adapt it?
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, and you don't have to go online and buy complicated equipment. You don't have to try to build a bomb, you know, in your mom's kitchen or anything like that. You just get in a car and drive.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, it is.
Awful. Other news. Now we can go into endless talk about all the Confederacy stuff and all the other things, or we could talk about other things. What is your pleasure? Because I imagine you've been talking about this all day.
Yeah, whatever you think it's all good. It's all good, Victoria. Let's just go with your priorities.
Okay, so briefly, the president sent out 3 tweets this morning, saying that basically saying that it's sad to see the history and culture of our great country being ripped apart with the removal of our beautiful statues and monuments, referring to Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. So it was quite extraordinary. Then he went on the attack against Senator Lindsey Graham, who put out an extremely stiff statement this morning against the president. And then Trump went after Senator Jeff Flake, who also went after the president and who said that the Republican Party can't claim to be the party of Lincoln if we're condemning white supremacy. Trump called Senator Jeff Flake Jeff Flake and said he's toxic. So it's quite extraordinary what is going on. Representative Steve Cohen, a Democrat from Tennessee, announced today that he will introduce articles of impeachment against President Trump based on his defense of the white supremacists who participated in the deadly rally in Charlottesville. So this is a different angle from the previous articles of impeachment that have been introduced by Representative Brad Sherman, that were based on the obstruction of justice and the Russia investigation.
Yeah, I pointed this out yesterday that I think he could be impeached right now, either under the emoluments clause for the D.C. hotel or for support of sedition, basically, support of the Confederacy.
40% of Americans support impeachment for Trump, according to a new poll released today. NBC News is reporting.
Whoa.
Poll is done by Public Religion Research Institute, showing a 10-point jump from the same results in February, and it was done before the rally in Charlottesville and Trump's controversial remarks this week.
Wow.
So
see, I think at some point, and I think we're damn close to it, and it'll probably happen when the stock market falls, but at some point the Republicans are going to say, you know, he is so toxic, he is so disorganized, he's so crazed that we are not going to get our tax cuts for billionaires. We are, you know, yes, we're getting, you know, more and more poisons and pollution into the environment so that our corporations are more profitable. You know, Scott Pruitt is doing, I'm guessing that you read that article in the New York Times back on August 11th. It was just shocking what Scott Pruitt is doing at EPA on behalf of toxic and polluting industries. But, you know, at some point, the Republicans are going to say, we're not getting everything that we want from this guy, and we need to pull the plug and put Mike Pence in there. And I think they're getting close.
But it's interesting that business has already said, we're out of there.
Yes. Well, he's lost the military. He had all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff come out yesterday and tweet against him. He's lost business, and he's lost, and he's just trashing Jeff Flake and Lindsey Graham when John McCain's probably not going to be around to vote for him, and he only had a 2-vote margin in the Senate to begin with. That takes down 3. That means he gets nothing done.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Now, he does still have his evangelical leaders' support. However, a group of 4,000 religious leaders from around the country are rallying around a rule that prevents houses of worship from participating in explicitly political activities. Specifically, they're calling on Congress not to upend the Johnson Amendment, which bans 501c3 organizations, including houses of worship, from endorsing candidates or explicitly engaging in electoral politics. And Trump has taken steps to weaken the amendment's rules. So that's a number of denominations, not widespread evangelical support, which is very interesting. So he is obviously, other areas of religion, including within Christianity, are having some issues here.
Yeah, I saw this up close and personal when I was back in the 80s when I was running the Community for Abused Kids up in New Hampshire. And I went to one of the annual meetings of the National Religious Broadcasters Association, the NLRB, or whatever it is, the National, whatever. And there's a bunch of those guys who are just running a scam. I mean, they're just running a business nakedly, with booths and merchandise and fundraising software and all this kind of stuff. And so if they can get around the Johnson Amendment, they can just make more money. And their religion is secondary. In fact, Robert Schiller gave the keynote at the particular one I was at. I think it was in 1980. And he took them to task. He absolutely trashed them, which was shocking. He got virtually no applause at the end. And this was just before the big Jim Baker scandal. So he was proven right. Robert Schiller, I was so impressed by him. But anyhow, back to you, Victoria.
Yeah, he had some ethics.
He did.
Understand.
Yeah, the guy with the Crystal Cathedral, yes.
I've just sent you an article you're going to be fascinated to read.
Okay.
Okay. On a slightly lighter note, but maybe depends whether you're traveling, the airline industry is bracing for a huge surge in travel over Labor Day amid low fuel prices and improving economy and decreasing airfares. Airlines for America estimates that 16.1 million passengers will fly on U.S. airlines over the 7-day travel period. That's a 5% increase, or an additional 110,000 passengers a day from the 15.4 million passengers last year.
Is that because of the eclipse?
No, because the eclipse is Monday. So no, it's not. No, this is because it's low fuel prices and things.
Low fares.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. I know a lot of people are trying to get in position for the eclipse right now, but that's fascinating. Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you, always. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016, one of my favorites. In her writings, this is from page 62, by the way, a middle-class primer is the chapter title. In her writings, which have become foundational for libertarian theology, author Ayn Rand suggested that the only purpose of government should be to prevent oppression by force. What she neglected to consider was all the force inherent in nature. If you're hungry, there is the force of biology. If you're homeless, you confront the force of winds, storms, ice, and rain. If you're sick, you confront the ravages and force of disease. These were the forces that provoked the first governments, the first communities, the first clans and tribes, the first nation states. It's easy for libertarian elitists, such as multimillionaire TV talking heads or college kids reading Atlas Shrugged, to talk about how there should be no government beyond police, the army, and the courts. They all have enough resources that they don't need to deal with the forces of raw nature. And that explains why billionaires would bankroll libertarian-leaning think tanks that will, when the crash comes with its full force, tell us it was caused by big government. However, in the real world, humans must confront both nature and other humans, which is why we create governments and why we create economies. But it wasn't until 1776 when Thomas Jefferson placed John Locke's right to life, liberty, and property, or replaced it, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the idea of a large class of working people had the ability to pursue happiness, the middle class. It wasn't until 1776 that was even seriously considered as a cornerstone obligation to government. This is also the first time in history that the word happiness had ever appeared in any nation's formative documents, as Jefferson wrote in 1817 to Dr. John Manners, quote, "The evidence of this natural right, like that to our right of life, liberty, the use of our faculties, the pursuit of happiness is not left to the feeble and sophisticated investigations of reason, but is impressed on the sense of every man." As Jefferson realized, with no government interference by setting the rules of the game of business and fair taxation, there could be no broad middle class, maybe a sliver of small business and artisans, but the vast majority of us would be the working poor under the yoke of elites. The economic royalists know this, which gets to the root of why they set out to destroy government's involvement in the economy. After all, in a middle-class economy, they may have to give up some of their power, and some of the higher end of their wealth may even be redistributed, horrors of horrors, for schools, parks, libraries, and other things that support a healthy middle-class society but are not needed by the rich, who live in a parallel but separate world from the rest of us. As Jefferson laid out in his 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval, a totally free market where corporations reign supreme, just like the oppressive governments of old, could transform America, quote, until the bulk of the society is reduced to be mere automatons of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sinning and suffering. Then begins indeed the bella omnium in omnia, which some philosophers observing to be so general in this world have mistaken it for the natural instead of the abusive state of man. Although this may come as a sudden realization to many, we've really known it all our lives. In fact, in the 6,000-year history of the civilized world, a middle class emerging in any nation has been such a rarity as to be largely historically invisible. The United States has had two great periods of what we today call a middle class. The first was from the 1700s to the mid-1800s and was fueled by virtually free land for settlers, stolen from the Indians, and free labor, slavery in the South and indentured immigrants in the North. The result was, as de Tocqueville pointed out, the most well-educated, politically active, middle-class non-aristocrats in the world. The second period didn't take hold until after World War II, during my dad's lifetime. Unlike the first, which was fueled by free land and slaves, the second had to be carefully constructed with specific and what some might define as socialist policies put in place during the New Deal,
which asserted more democratic control over the economy and workplace in order to keep the economic royalists in check. To both stimulate and balance the domestic economy, FDR reinstituted progressive taxation, which gave workers more to spend and gave the rich an incentive to pay their workers better to maintain a stable workplace, since if they took the money themselves, it would just mostly go to taxes, thus stimulating demand for more goods and services. Progressive taxation has a long history. As Jefferson said in a 1785 letter to James Madison, quote, "Another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt from taxation all below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise." FDR eventually hiked the top income tax rate paid by the super rich in America to 90%. This had a twofold effect. First, it held income inequality in check and ushered in an era of equal income and a growth among all classes. Unlike the Gilded Age, when the economy grew at a blistering pace but the gains were afforded only to the robber barons, the period between 1947 and 1980 saw unparalleled equitable growth. During these 30-plus years, the poorest fifth in America saw a 116% increase in their incomes. The middle fifth, 111% increase. Top 5% only saw an 85% increase. All income classes shared in the prosperity of the times when the top marginal income tax rate was above 70%. The second effect of a high income tax rate was to bring stability to the economy. And then it goes through the whole explanation of how that worked. The book is The Crash of 2016.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Manuel Perez Rocha. He is an associate fellow with the Institute for Policy Studies. IPS-DC.org is the website. You can tweet him at Manuel Perez IPS or IPS_DC. Manuel, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. NAFTA. Let's talk about NAFTA. What is the status and state of these renegotiations? I talked with Melinda St. Louis last night from Public Citizen, and she said that basically there's 500 corporations that have sent their people for these negotiations, but there are no representatives of we the people. Is the Trump administration basically repeating the process that we've seen for decades now of, these negotiations will be done of, by, and for big corporations?
Yeah, that's correct. And therefore, we know little about the status of the renegotiation because we're not invited to the table, or as it's called, to the side room, where only corporations are there to whisper to the ears of the negotiators of our countries. So we know little about the status. In fact, even worse, the Mexican government decided that the negotiations would be secret. They bluntly put it like that they wouldn't show to the Mexican people the cards or the strategies. They said that this was necessary. They justified it, said that it's necessary not to reveal the cards to the counterparts. However, in the end, this is what's going on. Yeah, yesterday there was a big march in Mexico, a big rally with peasant groups and unions and environmentalists decrying this secrecy. And more than 10,000 people marched in Mexico City.
Wow. And those people, are they marching in Mexico City for the elimination of NAFTA, for the changes in NAFTA? It has seemed to me that ever since NAFTA was passed, that all three countries, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, all three of us got screwed. The only winners were the giant multinational corporations that right now have lawsuits to the tune of $30 billion against sovereign governments.
Of course, this is what has to be understood, basically, that it is not some, as President Trump portrayed it during his campaign and continues doing so, it isn't like one country gets crushed and the other wins. In Mexico, a very, very tiny elite has been winning with NAFTA. Most of the people have been, most of the working class and the medium class of Mexico has been really affected in many ways. What has to be understood is that originally, the original design of NAFTA was to make them best to make the best of the salary gap between the U.S. and Canada on one side and Mexico on the other, and this is what has moved so many companies to Mexico. But this has not made up for all the jobs lost in Mexico as well, and all the livelihoods in the rural areas lost in Mexico because of NAFTA as well. So it's been however you want to see it, has been in detriment of our populations, NAFTA. Yeah, and I was just hearing your prior program about the Kuznets curve, and they were saying that inequality is a design failure, and this is exactly what NAFTA has been, a design to impoverish people and to fill the pockets of corporate, the corporate elite with so much money. And it's not a coincidence that inequality has skyrocketed so much in the U.S. and in Mexico precisely in the last 2 decades. No?
Yeah, and perhaps in Canada as well. I don't know the statistics there. So you're an associate fellow with the Institute for Policy Studies, a think tank here in D.C. What are your recommendations?
Well, we're working, internationally among sectors, among unions, environmentalists, and we produced a declaration 2 months ago when we had a large gathering in Mexico City with hundreds of people. Lots of people from the U.S. and Canada went there as well, from the National Farmers Union, from the AFL-CIO, from Public Citizen, from the Sierra Club, etc. And our recommendation is now to hold on. First of all, they have so much hurry in renegotiating NAFTA, and it's so confusing because it's not very clear what the United States government really wants. And the recommendation is to hold on until there is a democratic process in which organizations of all sorts can participate and can have a meaningful debate. But for example, one of the recommendations is that we have to reinstate rules of origin, but not only rules of origin at the North American level, but at national level, so we can guarantee that our internal trade in North America has more national content. The problem with Mexico's exports, 80% of Mexican exports go to the U.S., but they're not really Mexican. Mexico is an assembly plant, a massive assembly plant because of the cheap labor. And what we need is to put, as Mexicans, I'm of Mexican origin, we need to put much more national content into the exports of Mexico. That is that make small producers participate more because they've been completely sidelined of international trade. So this is just one proposal. The other one, big one, is that salaries in Mexico, wages have to stopped being suppressed because they're officially suppressed, and they maintain the minimum level to less than $5 a day, and this is completely anti-competitive, of course, for U.S. and Canadian labor. Third, we have to, I don't know if Melinda spoke about this yesterday, Melinda St. Louis, about the need to get rid of the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism that allows corporations to bring governments to tribunals like the World Bank's ICSID, the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes. We have to get rid of that unfair system that also has this chilling effect on government regulations. Government responsible social environmental regulations are chilled because of this fear that the big companies can bring them and sue them for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Mexico has lost hundreds of millions of dollars already under these suits. Canada is being sued for billions, and the U.S. is also at risk of being sued permanently.
Yeah.
So there's many proposals, but of course we don't have the space to have them heard.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff, and it's getting no coverage in the media whatsoever, and we really need to pay attention to what's going on here. Although it's all happening behind closed doors, which is not a good sign. Manuel Perez Rocha, the Associate Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, ips-dc.org. Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you very much.
Great talking with you. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls and my thoughts on all of the above right after this. And welcome back. Charles in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Hey, Charles, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hey, well, just I want to add a couple of things. First of all, you had your guest on yesterday, and he said that David Duke was a Democrat.
Yeah, well, we know he ran as a Republican.
Well, he ran as a Democrat in 75 and 79 and got nowhere, then ran for president in 88, got nowhere. After that point, he switched to Republican and then got elected to the state.
Yep.
But anyway, I just read on the local news here that the Klan, I'm right in the shadows of Stone Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, I'm facing the opposite side of the big mural.
Wow.
It's like literally, like people go down there and walk around the park. I'm about a mile from there, mile and a half.
Yeah, I've been there.
Anyway, they wanted to apply the Klan wanted to apply to burn a cross on October 21st. Got denied. If you know, used to live here in this area, and the DeKalb County, Stone Mountain area is majority black or heavily African American, and quite a few middle class black, and it's changed since those days, and that's not happening today.
Yeah.
So,
is there any kind of a I realize that Stone Mountain has become a tourist attraction and a revenue source for the community. And I would understand why people would not want to lose that. But on the other hand, it is 3 Confederate generals. Is there any effort in the community, in the Stone Mountain community where you live, Charles, to say, hey, time to change this somehow?
Not only is it in the community, the AJC, Atlanta Journal Constitution, since Saturday, since the entire incident, there's been talk that they want to basically, file off the entire mural.
Wow.
There's been talk in the entire Atlanta area. This county here, we're represented by Hank Johnson, which was one of the, most, progressive liberal congressmen in the entire country. This is pretty much the black representative area. And, most people don't really bother it because, it's just there. People who visit it, aren't really there for the mural. I mean, you may get a couple of years ago they had a big some sort of reunion or something, and they were here, and people just kind of like looked at them with curiosity.
Yeah.
But
when
this area here, like people, to make a long story short, those people had better not start anything around here because a lot of the African Americans here really respect their Second Amendment rights. It would be horrible. Secondly, I want to say, if I can get real quick. Everybody's calling up when I say these shows, these guys, and they seem to divert the conversation to like the Democratic Party and corporations and blah, 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 blah. And, I believe in, corporations are, they're big users. But progressives over the years have been, not sympathetic toward African Americans. You have Benjamin Tillman, the biggest racist ever. But he's responsible for the Tillman Act and known to be a big progressive.
Right.
You look at guys who, consider themselves.
That was in 1909, though. Let's
credit.
Go
ahead.
No, the Tillman Act was 1909. I mean, that was a very different era, a very different time.
Not really, because like right after this, that's when soon after Plessy versus Ferguson, and that's when all of this. They call it the. You should get James Rowan back on. He's an expert on this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
This is when.
Yeah. Charles, I'm out of time, but spot on. Thank you very much. It's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be very interesting. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Okay, this I mentioned this before the break at the, one of the breaks recently. Anyhow, this tweet from Auburn at Auburn Seminary. Wow, line of residents in Durham, North Carolina, attempting to turn themselves in for the crime of removing the Confederate monument. You'll recall that there was a Confederate monument that was spontaneously torn down either yesterday or the day before yesterday by local people in Durham, North Carolina. And the police department said, we are treating this as a felony, as destruction of public property. And so now you've got this long line of people, I mean, a huge long line of people. You can check my Twitter feed on this thing. And it's been retweeted 6,400 times, and that was before I retweeted it too. People saying, yeah, I was there, I participated, sure, put me in jail. Yeah, it's just like shutting down the criminal justice system. It's amazing. You'll recall when Victoria Jones was on the line with us, she said, I just sent you a story you're going to find interesting. She did. It's in the Washington Journal. WashingtonJournal.com is the website. And it went up yesterday. It's by Grant Stern. And the headline, newly leaked emails just revealed Trump family implicated in $350 million fraud investigation. Now, the Trump Soho Hotel in Manhattan was going to be a sweet deal for the Trump family. If they could get this thing built, it wouldn't be done with Trump money. It would be a licensing deal. They'd have millions of dollars coming to them with no liability. And so they really worked hard to make this thing happen. The Trump Soho condominium hotel, it ultimately failed. In 2014, it was foreclosed upon by its lenders. But the article, it's beginning to look like Special Counsel Mueller will catch President Trump and his three eldest children committing the first ever reality TV show assisted financial crime, because they actually talked about it on The Apprentice, right? All collaborating in a $350 million bank fraud related to the Trump Soho condominium hotel. And they're going after Don Jr., they're going after Ivanka, and they're going after Eric, and as well as Donald. The fraud-ridden Trump Soho Hotel project ultimately failed. We've obtained leaked copies of these emails related to the key lawsuit, which are embedded below, that outline the Trump family's complicity in a major financial crime. They show that Donald Trump and his three eldest children participated in a cover-up in order to keep borrowing massive construction loans on the hotel they pitched on NBC's Apprentice show from failing during the financial turndown. Trump Organization earned $3 million from the fraud just last year alone, even as the hotel's fortunes have sunk post-election. 3 weeks ago, Bloomberg News reported that Mueller is focusing on the Lower Manhattan Trump Soho deal. Vanity Fair reported recently that new emails revealed the Trump family's participation in a criminal enterprise there. I'm telling you, the Republicans are over it with this guy. And, of course, Mueller was a Republican, too. They're going to find some basis to impeach him. And, I don't think it's going to have anything to do with, I don't think it's going to be about the election. I don't think it's going to be about Russia. I think it's going to be about Trump being broke, being a hustler, being a con man, and committing financial crimes, financial fraud. And I've been saying this for some time. I really think that's where the bodies are buried, in Trump land. And I don't think that he intended to become president. I don't think he even intended to become the Republican Party's nominee. I think he was just very upset that NBC had not renewed his contract for The Apprentice. And so he was going to show them, he was going to become even more famous by entering the Republican primary, and he was going to do it in a totally Bulworth way. I mean, this is the movie, you know, Mel Brooks' movie, The Producers, where, you know, the guys get together and say, hey, let's make a Broadway play that's a complete flop, and we'll organize it so that after it flops, we can keep all the investors' money. And if it doesn't flop, then we're in big trouble, because then the investors' money has to actually be spent, and et cetera. And so they put together this play called Springtime for Hitler. And it's like thinking it would be a huge flop, and it actually worked. And the irony and the comparison is pretty strong, you know, because in The Producers, the play was Springtime for Hitler. In Trump land, he tried to run the same scam on Republican voters, and now we've got an orange version of kind of a pathetic, weak-kneed Hitler, anyway, in the White House. And it's at some point, I keep saying, at some point, the Republicans are going to say enough already. You know, there is a story out there that Mitch McConnell met with 80 Republicans yesterday. That they're seriously trying to figure out what to do. They're terrified to go to do town halls. They're terrified to go on television. When was the last time you saw an elected Republican on the air? I mean, it's just like, it ain't happening. They're scared to death. Anyhow, Joe in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. Am I saying that right, Joe?
Yes, you are, Tom. I'm a long-time listener. I grew up in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Calvin College.
Oh, great.
Christian Reformed Church. Had some neat discussions in the early 60s, rather, with the DeVosses. But anyways, I called because I used to teach. I taught history for 30-some years, and some of those were in Hazard, Kentucky, in a little community college there. They wanted me to teach a black history course. Now, I'm not black, but I went ahead and I studied at the University of Iowa back in the mid-60s, where I got my master's degree. And they didn't have black history courses there either, but I was interested in the subjects around a lot. And I taught a course there every other year. And there was about 10% black students. So, and things were a little different. I don't remember any statutes in that. This is a little town of Hazard, honoring the Confederacy. It was part of Kentucky, which was probably mostly pro-union. But what I really called you about was that my wife and I were watching CBS News last night for the first time in months. We recorded all three major networks to see how they would handle what was going on in Charlestonville, Virginia. And lo and behold, on CBS, they had three people. I think one of your callers mentioned it earlier. They had three people come on, and they said, we're going to ask these three people who voted for Trump how they feel now. Now, when they showed the people, my wife and I just about gasped out loud, and we really did. There were three ladies. That's not the big issue, but two of the ladies were black ladies. And they all three said, oh, we love Trump. We voted for him, and we're still backing him. That's all they had.
Wow.
And that really shocked us. Otherwise, the coverage was pretty good last night for what was going on in the United States and so on. But that really blew us away.
Yeah, it would blow me away, too. He's going to have, I mean, as long as the propaganda channels, as long as right-wing hate radio and Fox News continue to aggressively support him, he's going to have a strong base. But the day that they turn on him, it's all going to evaporate, or most of it is going to evaporate. All he'll have is Breitbart Newsline, and then he's going to be in a real pickle. Joe, thanks for the call. Thanks for the heads up on that. That's fascinating. And I appreciate the call, and we will be back right after the news right here at the bottom of the hour. It's 27 minutes and a half past.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day right after this.
We're reading today from The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shearer here on the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. This is from the foreword by Shearer. He writes, though I lived and worked in the Third Reich during the first half of its brief life, watching at first hand Adolf Hitler consolidate his power as dictator of a great but baffling nation and then lead it off to war and conquest, this personal experience would not have led me to attempt to write this book had there not occurred at the end of World War II an event unique in history. This was the capture of most of the confidential archives of the German government and all its branches, including those of the Foreign Office, the Army and Navy, the National Socialist Party, and Heinrich Himmler's secret police. Never before, I believe, has such a vast treasure fallen into the hands of contemporary historians. Hitherto, the archives of a great state, even when it was defeated in war and its government overthrown by revolution, as happened to Germany and Russia in 1918, were preserved by it, and only those documents which served the interests of the subsequent ruling regime were ultimately published. The swift collapse of the Third Reich in the spring of 1945, however, resulted in the surrender not only of a vast bulk of its secret papers, but of other priceless materials, such as private diaries, highly secret speeches, conference reports, and correspondence, and even transcripts of telephone conversations of the Nazi leaders tapped by a special office set up by Hermann Goering in the Air Ministry. General Franz Halder, for example, kept a voluminous diary jotted down in Gabelsberger shorthand, not only from day to day, but from hour to hour throughout the day. It's a unique source of concise information for the period between August 14, 1939 and September 24, 1942, when he was chief of the army staff and in daily contact with Hitler and the other leaders of Nazi Germany. It is the most revealing of the German diaries, but there are others of great value, including those of Dr. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda and close party associate of Hitler, and of General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations of the High Command of the Armed Forces. That's the OKW. There are diaries of the OKW itself and of the Naval High Command. Indeed, the 60,000 files of the German Naval Archives, which were captured at Schloss Tambach near Coburg, contain practically all of the signals, ship's logs, diaries, memoranda, etc. of the German Navy from April 1945, when they were found, all the way back to 1868, when the modern German Navy was founded. The 485 tons of records of the German Foreign Office captured by the U.S. First Army in various castles and mines in the Harz Mountains, just as they were about to be burned on orders from Berlin, cover not only the period of the Third Reich, but go back to the Weimar Republic, to the beginning of the Second Reich of Bismarck. For many years after the war, tons of Nazi documents lay sealed in a large U.S. Army warehouse in Alexandria, Virginia, our government showing no interest in even opening the packing cases to see what historical interest, documents of historical interest might lie within them. Finally, in 1955, 10 years after their capture, thanks to the initiative of the American Historical Association and the generosity of a couple of private foundations, the Alexandria papers were opened, and a pitifully small group of scholars with an inadequate staff and equipment went to work to sift through them and photograph them before the government, which is a great hurry in this matter, returned them to Germany. They proved a rich find. So did such documents as the partial stenographic record of 51 Führer conferences on the daily military situation as seen and discussed in Hitler's headquarters, and the fuller text of the Nazi warlord's table talk with his old party cronies and secretaries during the war. The first of these was rescued from the charred remains of some of Hitler's papers at Berchtesgaden by an intelligence officer of the U.S. 101st Airborne Division, and the second was found among Martin Bormann's papers. And he goes through and he lists some more of the stuff. And he says, I have not read, of course, all of the staggering amount of documentation. It would be far beyond the power of any single individual. But I've worked my way through a considerable part of it, slowed down, as all toilers in this rich vineyard must be, by the lack of any suitable indexes. It is quite remarkable how little those of us who were stationed in Germany during the Nazi time, journalists and diplomats, really knew of what was going on behind the facade of the Third Reich. A totalitarian dictatorship, by its very nature, works in great secrecy and knows how to preserve that secrecy from the prying eyes of outsiders. It was easy enough to record and describe the bare, exciting, and often revolting events in the Third Reich. An Anschluss with Austria, the surrender of Chamberlain at Munich, the occupation of Czechoslovakia, the attacks on Poland, Scandinavia, the West, the Balkans and Russia, the horrors of the Nazi occupation and the concentration camps, and the liquidation of the Jews. But the fateful decisions secretly made, the intrigues, the treachery, the motives, and the aberrations which led up to them, the parts played by the principal actors behind the scenes, the extent of the terror they exercised, and their technique of organizing it. All this and much more remained largely hidden from us until the secret German papers turned up. Some may think that it is much too early to try to write a history of the Third Reich, that such a task should be left to a later generation of writers to whom time has given perspective. I found this view especially prevalent in France when I went to do some research there. Nothing more recent than the Napoleonic era, I was told, should be tackled by writers of history. And then he goes on to kind of push back on that view. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shearer. Yeah, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Rick in Weston, West Virginia. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I've been listening to you the last few days. What Trump did was, hopefully he will take down the Republican Party as it is today, as it is, because obviously he doesn't have the capacity to lead this country, much like make policy. I mean, so many blunders. Now, I live in a county. We got Stonewall Jackson Lake, Stonewall Jackson Dam. We got statues. We got this. But West Virginia didn't even become West Virginia until 1863, and they have never even fought in the Civil War. I live in an area where they proudly display the Confederate flag. But what I don't understand, I'm the father, and I come from a military background. I have to respectfully disagree on a couple points. And the points are, they were only following orders. Now, I don't know Lee's or Beauregard's or political inclinations, but they were all graduates of West Point.
Mm-hmm. That's how they got to be generals.
I don't think they really had much choice. I mean, when the Confederacy seceded from the Union, what were they do? I'm still.
We hanged Nazis who made that excuse, Rick.
I know we did. We at Nuremberg. You're exactly right. We got 5 chapters of the Ku Klux Klan in the state of West Virginia. And I never understood that. And we got skinheads. You know what really freaks me out? People I know rode motorcycles back in the 70s and turned into a bunch of skinheads with ponytails carrying pistols. They have no education. They don't understand. I don't even know how to put it. It makes me so, and it just. But you're right about. I was going to talk to you about your book, Crash 2016. I think you got it off by about 22 months.
Yeah, I think so too. And
really, it will take. It may cost a lot of lives. I don't know, but I hope not.
Me too. It's a tough one. Rick, thanks for the call and for the update on West Virginian sensibilities. I appreciate it. It's nice to hear from you. Jack in Derby, Kansas. Hey, Jack, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Derby's a suburb of Wichita, the home of the coctopus.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's been hit economically pretty hard for lots of different reasons, but a lot of reasons you talk about deunionization, states competing against other states, offering subsidies to lure jobs out of the community to other locations and so forth. And as a 35-year-old, when I hired into an aircraft company, I got a pension and a 401k and health care. And through the crash, I, like so many others, have had to become contract employees as opposed to a regular employee. And when you become contract, you don't get any benefits at all. You usually get a little better compensation, but no benefits. And now that I'm looking for another job, they don't want contractors anymore. They want direct employees with the same poor wages they offered before, but now with no benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going on for years, and some of the organizers of the Charlottesville rally recognized this and claimed that Trump's filling the swamp instead of draining the swamp was part of the reasons that they thought that they wanted to secede and form their own union. And I think that this has been a big effort by the powerful corporate interests to deceive people and point the blame away from themselves onto the least powerful among us. I'd like your thoughts on that.
I think you're right, and it always has been. And this is why billionaires and big corporations support things like the Fox News operation, and right-wing hate radio. It's the and all these giant think tanks that are spewing out right-wing propaganda constantly is because at the core, the message of all the right-wing, there's all this peripheral stuff about guns and gay people and God and 10 Commandments and abortion and blah, 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 blah. But at the core, it's all about making rich people richer and freeing corporations from the restraints that might, protect the rest of us from their poisons. And so, yeah, I think you've nailed it. This is all about greed, and it's destroying our country, as it has done on numerous occasions in the past. And, hopefully this time we will learn from it. Jack, very well said. Thank you for the call. Michael in Brookline, Mass. Hey, Michael, what's up?
There's a couple of things. The first one is on the stock market. There's a website called www.mutpl.com. The stock market is now valued not as the crash of 2008, but as the crash of 1929.
I agree.
The price-to-earnings ratio is exactly what it was just before the 29 crash.
Yep.
That's highly overvalued.
Yep.
Okay? And you can watch this, okay?
Oh, yeah, we're in a bubble.
We're in a bubble, right. The second thing is about Trump. I think we're actually fortunate. He got elected on a fascist coalition, and the military and large sections, the corporate establishment, is running from him. Even like people like Lindsey Graham, which is great. My main fear is that he decides to nuke North Korea, but he can't do that without James Mattis, who doesn't seem to be totally insane. So I'm hopeful. This is not Hitler, because he does not have the type of support that Hitler had at that time.
He actually can do it without James Mattis. The way that the nuclear code launch sequence thing is organized, and there was some good reporting on this a week or so ago in either the Post or the Times. The way that code, that whole launch process is initiated is it basically goes directly from the president right to the guys who turn the keys and push the button and fire the missiles. And it does not go through the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It does not go through the Pentagon. It's a direct command. And the reason why is because it envisions a time, of Armageddon, essentially, of, where the president might be the last one standing, or there's nuclear missiles on their way here, and you got 3 minutes to get this thing done, and there's no time to call up a guy at the Pentagon and say, what do you think about this? So I'm not reassured, frankly, by Mattis being there. And I do think that Donald Trump, if he's looking at going to prison, and along with his kids, for this Trump Soho deal or whatever it may be, unless he can get Mike Pence to commit to him that he's going to pardon Trump and all his kids, I don't think it's too bizarre to think that he might try to take down the whole world with him. And that scares the bejesus out of me. That concerns me tremendously. But it's spot on the stock market, Michael. I'm totally with you. There's some really good reporting on this, by the way, over at the Financial Times right now. Michael, thank you for the call. Deborah in Sebring, Florida. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Hang on a sec. Let me get you off speaker. Okay, I got you off now. When you were talking earlier about the economy and the bale wire and the bubble gum, I'm not sure what you want to call this third leg, but there's a third leg that's propping up the economy, and it's actually the good leg. And it's federal spending, which the Republicans are fixing to cut.
You're right.
In their new budget.
You're right.
And, National Endowment for the Arts supports all of the cultural organizations in our country. My daughter's a professional ballerina. She could lose her job if they don't fund it.
Yep.
And, the education funding, they want to cut that. teachers are going to be out of work, and our kids are not going to get good education.
Yeah.
So that's going to help to collapse the economy along with your bubble gum and bale wire.
Yeah, you're right. Federal spending is something on the order of 20% of the economy. I forget the exact number, but it's in that neighborhood. Now, about half of that, of course, is Pentagon, but the other half is not inconsequential stuff. And you know, whether it's medical research or whether it's the arts, and it's all you know, stuff that we should be you know, honoring, valuing, and nurturing. And instead, the Republicans, in their headlong rush to come up with more money to give back to the billionaires in the form of tax cuts, want to just destroy basically everything. It's incredible. Deborah, thank you. Nailed it. Great call. We'll be right back. It is 44 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So the Daily Stormer, the Nazi site, they lost their U.S. domain. They go into a Russian domain. They just lost their Russian domain. Where are they going to go now? And welcome back. James watching Free Speech TV in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Good afternoon, Professor Hartmann.
Hey, James.
A short comment and a quick question for you. I hope you can help me with. The comment is, it's so sad that Lincoln's grand old party has become the grand obfuscation party. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Its members are basically banana Republicans and foxholes.
Yep.
The question is, who profits from the World Bank in International Monetary Fund?
Say that again? Yeah.
Who profits from the World Bank?
Yeah, I don't know that. You know, I have a functional familiarity with the workings of the Fed, but I don't know that much about the IMF and the World Bank. I would assume that. Well, I shouldn't assume anything, and I shouldn't just guess anything. I don't know the answer to your question, James. I would guess that there's probably some oligarchs behind it that are doing well, or big banks, but I just don't know. That's a question to put to somebody like Ellen Brown, who's a real expert on that stuff.
They were instituted by the United Nations, were they not?
I believe so, but you know, I'm like I said, this is not an area of expertise for me.
Well, you know, they say follow the money.
Yeah. It's you know, and frankly, I mean, the Fed is actually serving, or arguably serving, a very, very useful purpose. And my understanding is that the IMF and the World Bank have that ability. But one of them, I think it's the charter of the World Bank, was, you know, to reduce poverty around the world. But instead, what they had been doing is giving, you know, giant loans to like India to build nuclear power plants and things. And but it's been years since we've had an expert on to talk about this stuff. Thanks for stirring up my curiosity. I'm going to see what I can find out. James, thanks for the call. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I want to quote you quickly. Yes, these are interesting times, although somewhat scary. Today I read on my search engine homepage that the FBI has someone from over in Europe who was involved with writing code, and he's turned state's evidence. And I don't know his name or anything about this, but he said something that got out to the effect that he was glad he was still alive. And
you're talking about the guy who wrote the code for the virus that was used in the attack against John Podesta?
Against Podesta, and I think it had something to do. It may have something to do with the DNC.
Right. Yeah. That part is grayer, but yeah, right. I saw that. He's Ukrainian, I believe.
Yep. So there's another development which I didn't know anything about, or I wasn't aware of it. Today on C-SPAN, there was an interview. The title of it was Big Data Politics, and it wasn't just about politics. It was about how big data works and relates to It was a psychologist there. His name was Michael Kosinski from Stanford, and he was born behind the Iron Curtain, and he was born over in the Russian somewhere. And David Brock was a moderator, and they did not, they didn't dwell on it, but they talked about how data has changed the landscape.
Oh, yeah. Look up Cambridge Analytica and Robert Mercer and the role that they played in the Trump campaign. It's mind-boggling. Randy, I'm sorry we're out of time, but good stuff. Thank you for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Lori in Bellevue, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Long time no talk to. I was getting concerned about all of the Republicans knowing what's coming and all of their efforts put into keeping Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions in his position and keeping him safe and even getting Democrats behind it because they were afraid of what Trump would do. I personally think that he is the most dangerous person in the administration. And he is just rolling back every single progressive act since the Civil Rights Act. He's just systematically taking away rights of every minority group. And the Republicans aren't saying anything because everybody wants to protect poor Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions.
Well, the Republicans aren't saying anything because this is consistent with their agenda.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, make America white again. That's their whole shtick. So, but yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think Jeff Sessions is one of the more destructive elements of the Trump administration, particularly when it comes to the rule of law in this country, and all the more the tragedy. I'm pretty freaked out about what Scott Pruitt is doing over at EPA, but you know that has to do with people being poisoned and the profits of industry. Jeff Sessions controls the agency that has the police powers of government, and you know, government has the power to imprison us. Government has the power to execute us, and those are serious, serious, serious powers that countries like China use against their people to keep them, you know, passive and you know, whatever, and it concerns me tremendously too. Lori, thank you for the call. I share your concern. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. Hey, Omar, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I really think that, thanks so much for taking my call. I really think that the Republicans trying to take over the country and just turn us to like China, basically. They're going to run us like how China is being run.
Yeah, essentially an oligarchy. I don't disagree. In fact, I think we're already three-quarters of the way there.
Yes. The other thing I wanted to call you about, recently the governor of West Virginia switched from a Democrat to a Republican.
Right.
And that brings closer to the 34 states where if the Republicans have 34 governors, they can override the government. Can you just explain that a little bit and what is it all about?
The fifth article of the Constitution, Article 5 of the Constitution, says that the Constitution can be amended basically in two ways. Either the Congress can get together and come up with amendments, which is how every amendment that you'll find to the Constitution has been done. Congress does it. It passes Congress. It goes, I believe it has to pass by a 2/3 majority. It goes out to the states. 3/4 of the states ratify it. And then it comes, and then it comes back, and it's now, an amendment to the Constitution. I'm not sure if it requires a presidential signature or not. I think not. The second way for it to happen is for the states themselves to either get together and hold a large convention to rewrite anything they want in the Constitution, or to push up from the states a single or multiple amendments to the Constitution, and then if 3/4 of the states. It takes 2/3 of the states to convene a convention, which is 34, and it takes 3/4 of the states to ratify it, which is 38, as I recall, and maybe 36. I'd have to go back and look at the math. And they're you're absolutely right. They're very close to that number, and they have been holding practice constitutional conventions here in Washington, D.C. for several years now. This is a big priority for the billionaire networks that are funding the Republican Party and the hard right in this country. They want to institutionalize in the Constitution that bankers don't have to compete with the federal government anymore for your savings,
which of course is the federal debt. They want to institutionalize in the Constitution that corporations and billionaires have the absolute right to own politicians, as under the First Amendment. They want to memorialize in the Constitution, the money is the same thing as free speech, and that corporations are people. All of the sketchy stuff. They want to change the Constitution so that the Commerce Clause. This is the big one that they're all talking about, is change the Commerce Clause. Because the Commerce Clause, which allows the federal government to regulate commerce between and among the states, that Commerce Clause is what Bobby Kennedy was using to enforce civil rights laws in the 60s and has been used by the federal government, by progressives, Democrats, over the years, ever since the 60s, and frankly, before that, too. But, Bobby Kennedy really, really developed this well, going after the lunch counters down in the South. And they said, hey, states' rights, you don't have anything to do with us. And he said, no, you've got ketchup on your counter that was made in Pennsylvania. You're engaged in interstate commerce. We can regulate you. You cannot say no to black people sitting in your restaurant. And they want to do away with that. They want to blow out the Commerce Clause and make it so that basically the federal government doesn't have that power, so the South can go back to being, an apartheid place. So that's what's going on, Omar, and we need to pay serious attention to it. I got to run, but thank you for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, hi. The Daily News today, I guess, read my mind because Trump is fawning over these Confederate statues. But one of the sorest points in New York history is when he acquired the Bonwit Teller building to build Trump Towers, he promised the Metropolitan Museum of Art the statuary, the whole facade was landmarked. There were these 15-foot high statues on the facade of
I remember.
And there was also a 20 by 20 foot solid nickel grill work. And he promised those to the Met. And then one night, the 50 Polish illegal workers came in and tore the whole thing down. And he said, well, it wasn't safe. And then later on, he said it was ugly and that must be 1 tons worth of grill work disappeared. No one knows where it went to. It's solid nickel grill work. So, and then couple that with when he was at the CIA, when he made that stupid speech in front of that sacred wall, on his way out, he said they should redesign this to get rid of the columns in it. And then at the, you have something called the Building Museum down there, which I just saw pictures, which is beautiful. Mm-hmm. He wanted to eliminate these columns from the interior there. They're like the world's tallest interior classical columns. And he's got a thing about columns, but his sacred Confederate statues, he can put those in Mar-a-Lago if he's that interested in it.
Yeah.
Right.
I still think the person on Twitter who said, just grind away the guy, everything, leave the horse, right? And then everybody will get it. Hey, there was something here. What was the deal? Oh yeah, he was a traitor. And hang a white flag on top of the horse or something like that. But
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Bill.
But I was reminded though of when ISIS destroyed Palmyra.
Yes.
And with the same kind of indifference to the value of it as art or being thousands of years of civilization.
Yeah, although ISIS did it for ideological reasons and Donald Trump did it presumably because it would have been more expensive for him to preserve that stuff and transport it to the museum. Although, who knows? I honestly don't know exactly what his motivation was or even if it was just a mistake. Bill, thank you for the call. Thank you all for being with us today. Keep track of what's going on in Spain. It's a terrible situation. And we'll be back tomorrow with more on that and pretty much everything else. And I believe that Congressman Mark Pocan will be with us tomorrow, too. So in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Tag, you're it. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242.
Or visit tomsbeets.com.